First up is staff report, the outdoor sports field strategy implementation, brought to you by Commissioner Mark Dykstra. Welcome, Mark.
All right, we're ready to go. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight with me from staff is John Griffin, Project Manager with IPPW, and as well Jeffrey Silcox, Child Director of Environment and Parks. Jim Bowman would have been here tonight and offering assistance, but was called to a family matter, so I'm happy to deliver the presentation tonight. As a key foundation for the project and to share with Council these guiding documents, and it's the Recreation and Leisure Master Plan, the Waterloo Park Master Plan, the Outdoor Sports Field Strategy, and the City of Waterloo Culture Plan. These speak really to the planning to meet the future needs of the city associated with sports, recreation, parks, and culture as well. And they recognize that the city is a growing city and a city with set boundaries as well. To just provide Council a higher level of key findings, they speak to the continued growth in all ages related to baseball. And also the report responds to the potential loss of Diamonds 1 and 2 in Waterloo Park to fulfill the plans proposed for a festival heart. And also speaks to the need for ongoing maintenance and upgrades at our existing diamonds in the city. And if Council recalls, back in June, we noted the work that we have done in 2017 related to Regency Park, some work through Rim Park, West Wind Park. So the investment in sports fields has occurred in 2017 and moving forward. As part of the project start and noted at the initial stages, is really around trying to find a solution for 1 and 2. We, in Waterloo Park and the loss of those, we quickly recognized in consultation that the need to address growth was paramount and how that the demand was part of the study. And we had to expand that and look further. Hence all the various and different public consultation that we have undertaken. So everything from meetings with affiliated groups, the adult baseball leagues, the university sports leagues, we identified that, and we went into various public information center pre the June report in April and May, and post in November. Most recently in Thursday, had a meeting with a number of individuals at the Laurelwood Public School. We've done both media outreaches in soft and hard digital forms. We've engaged residents through our online platform, Engage Waterloo, and the reports in June, and today is part of the process as well. Also want to note to Council that staff have had meetings with both associations in Eastbridge and Laurelwood. The first recommendation speaks to the potential loss of programming of Diamonds 1 and 2 in Waterloo Park. What you see here before you is a plan that shows Diamonds 4, 5, and 6 at Rim Park, University Ave being at the bottom of the slide. We are proposing to light these diamonds, all 3 of them, and as they do not have lights. This will provide us 2 additional game slot times at 8 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. We also wish to reconfigure the diamond to offer broader playing opportunities for several different group types. This option was previously noted to Council in our June report. New to this work and the discussion in the report tonight is the recommendation to work on looking at Diamonds 3 and 4 in Waterloo Park, and this would be the consideration to reconfigure those 2 diamonds and also then light those diamonds. This really speaks to providing ongoing access to the university students and the league play that occurs there, but also enables future growth potential as well. To be clear to Council and the community, tonight is the discussion and a recommendation for Council to provide us direction to do further studies, lighting study and concept design study work for Rim Park 4, 5, and 6, and diamonds 3 and 4 in Waterloo Park. Tonight there is no decision about the removal of 1 and 2. We still wish to do fact-finding and due diligence. We will be back to council a year from now to provide further information and a recommendation in that regard. Also in the report tonight, we speak to 2 recommendations about meeting the current demand that we're facing within baseball, and this speaks to the programming of 2 diamonds, Eastbridge Green and Laurelwood Park. From our perspective, we recognize that we needed to separate the growth as an issue in the community, and these diamonds would not meet the need for any loss of diamonds related to Waterloo Park. The proposal for both existing diamonds at these parks is for T-ball use. So those are kids 8-year-old and younger, and if you can appreciate that, they are using a tee, and sometimes if they're lucky, the ball will go past second base in that regards. Their play is proposed for Monday to Thursday nights with the rain date of Saturday. They would be there from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. with maybe some walk back and forth time to the diamonds. It would be for 1 game with approximately 12 players per side, and this would be during the weeks of May and June and a little into the summer as school transitions out. We have been working with the adjacent schools, and they're shown here, Lesser B. Pearson at Eastbridge, but and also Laurelwood, I'll show on the next slide, and the principal specifically to ensure there is parking opportunities at these school sites to provide parking for these 2 diamonds. No additional lights are proposed at either of these diamonds. To note to council, there is a current light for a rink site and water service, which is at both of these sites, the rinks are programmed for use. So this map here just shows you where the diamond is located in Eastbridge Green, the proximity of Lester B. Pearson School. Proposed work would include fencing for the players' benches, new players' benches, regrading the infield, sodding of part of the infield, regulatory signage, and then the paving of the transitional trail to Lester B. Pearson. In the same regard, specific to Laurelwood Park shown here, and noting that the school is off to the left of the slide, here again, T-ball use is a proposal, the same parameters around use that we're looking. It's Monday to Thursday with the Saturday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And as well, parking is proposed at the school. Here again, the same implementation for improvements are proposed, fencing for players' benches, new player benches, regrading the infield, improvements to the backstop, regulatory signage, and trees to separate the playground and diamond. As noted, there was a meeting February 22nd, last Thursday, where approximately 15 to 20 residents attended, and they noted that they are not in favor of the programming changes that are noted here. We do, however, feel the majority of the concerns that have been presented have been addressed, and they are noted in Appendix C of our report. So in summary, the key outcomes of the report really speak to the work that needs to respond to growth of baseball and increase the inventory of available diamond for available diamond users. It better utilizes the current diamonds at Eastbridge and Laurelwood Park, and it responds to the potential loss of diamonds 1 and 2 for the proposed development of the Festival Heart. We wish to really ensure that we maximize the use of our current field inventory and get the maximum amount of programmable time, as was recommendation in the outdoor sports field strategy. I'll conclude my opening remarks at this time. If there's questions prior to delegations, I can take those now.
Thank you, Mark. Seeing Councillor Whaley up first, and Councillor Burke as well.
Great to see that we're expanding the amount of programmable time. One of the ways you're doing that is lighting up Rim Park to allow 6 more games a night. And that's a good plan because Rim Park, obviously, there's no neighborhoods that are going to be impacted by the lights. The fields 3 and 4 in Waterloo Park are the same issue. There's no neighborhood really around there. Why wouldn't you be considering lighting them up as well?
Yes, and we, through Mayor to Councillor Whaley, yes, if I forgot to note that, 3 and 4 are being considered for lighting as well, and that would be the work that we desire to do at this time.
I didn't hear your answer.
All right, I'll try again. Sorry if I went over that point in my presentation, but diamonds 3 and 4 are being considered for lighting to offer that additional programming, 2 programming times per night on both of those fields.
Okay, next up, Councillor Burke and Councillor Freeman.
You mentioned, Mark, the paving of the trail at Lester B. Pearson. What's the walkability of the trail at Laurelwood? It seems to me that's a kind of sloppy area from time to time.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Burke, yes, the trail right to the school is paved. There is a segment that is stone dust from, I'm going to go to that slide there. From this segment down is stone dust, so that is, during these weather conditions, is sloppy, but during the summertime, that will be a nice walkable trail.
Would it be something that could be paved at some point?
Yes, it could be paved, and within our overall trail strategy, those are our park trails and links have identified long-term to get paved, and we want that for accessibility and improvements to that.
So the location of the diamond there, what's the distance? You may not even be able to answer this question. What's the distance from home plate to the nearest house in right field?
I'm going to, the distance to that, I would say, I'm going to look to John Griffin as well just to confirm based on the scale, but looking at that, maybe 50 feet from there, maybe 60 feet to that area if I look at the lot sizes.
I'm hoping that's more than that from home plate.
I think he's going up to the...
Yeah.
Are you going to the outfield, Mark? I think you're looking at house.
Next.
To the,
I don't know.
Sorry, to the, from this location, Councillor Burke?
All the way up to the house, way over there.
Out there?
Sure. Well, I'll point to it over here. No, not there. Right field, down the right field line.
Yep. Yeah, so if I look at these lots, if they're around, maybe thinking just off the hand here, maybe 40 feet wide, if that.
I think Councillor Burke is thinking of a home run.
Yeah.
Home run down right field.
Yeah.
Oh, the distance here. Sorry, I thought you meant the home. So,
no.
John, do you have an answer for me there?
We'd have to measure it. I'd have to measure it for you.
Well,
I can give you an approximate just down.
Well, even if you can give me the footprint of that diamond.
Down the first base line, if you like, just a second.
Because it's T-ball, so you don't have any more than a 60-foot base pass. So how much outfield do you need is kind of the question.
So out to the end of the, the second first baseline, it's 60 feet.
Okay.
So that doesn't get you to the circle. That's just
It's just
3/4 of the way down the infield.
Yeah, it's the cut part of the infield. No, I get that. 90 meters.
To the very outfield limit is 200 feet, but they barely even hit outside the infield. So.
No, painfully familiar with T-ball, believe me. To go back to diamonds 4, 5, 6 for a minute, and just asking because all of this gets mooshed together with diamonds 1 and 2. The expansions and the lighting of 4, 5, 6, is that something that would be necessary no matter what? Even if diamonds 1 and 2 were to stay online, would we need to do something with 4, 5, and 6 to bring them more into use?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Burke, yes, that is correct. The additional lighting would be recommended. Even the sports field strategy several years ago identified that need.
Next up is Councillor Freeman.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just want to make sure that I'm clear that tonight you are not asking us to discontinue use of diamonds 1 and 2.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Freeman, that is correct.
And so we're not talking about eliminating any play surfaces.
No, we are not tonight.
And one of the things for the Country Squire area. There are a lot of homes there, so it is my hope that when you do the lighting study, you'll look at lights that won't spill back.
Yes, again, to the councillor, yes, that would be the intention, dark sky lighting with low photometric footprint to maximize sort of playability. And also through that process too, we're recommending additional outreach and info sessions we want to share with the community, the intended plan as well.
So I just want to make sure that what we're doing tonight is very similar to what we did with soccer, right? Where the 2 soccer pitches were looking to be discontinued because we needed to expand the cemetery. But we did not put those offline until we actually had 2 brand new playing surfaces that actually increased the inventory. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Councillor Freeman.
Further questions, Commissioner Dykstra? Seeing none. Thank you, Mark. And just to the clerk, is it that the podium one the problem, Mike?
When I turn my mic on, it stops, and when I turn my mic
Okay, we're going to take delegations now. First up, Aaron Hornatage. Welcome, Aaron. Yep. Thank you, and you'll have up to 10 minutes.
All right. I want to thank you genuinely from the bottom of my heart to have the opportunity here to represent myself as a citizen of the city, as a business owner, and a volunteer, a part of a great organization here in the city. Outdoor sports fields are an essential component of the city's infrastructure, supporting recreational and leisure activities. Meeting the demand for sports fields today and in the future is important because these fields contribute to an active lifestyle and the social, cultural, and economic vitality of the city. At the foundation of Waterloo Park Master Plan and Outdoor Sports Fields Plan is a call to improve the use and playability of existing sports fields before developing new fields. The vision of the strategy is the residents of Waterloo have equitable access to quality outdoor sports fields throughout the city, thereby fostering improved individual and community health and increased capacity for sport and play. I'm really excited to hear the proposals that have been put in front of us here today. I just want to thank Jim Bowman and Mark and Jim and John for listening over the last year. I think it's vital to our businesses and to our children and to the future of Waterloo that we continue to offer something so great with sports. Sports is part of our cultural identity here in Canada, and not just in Canada, but with the Olympics in Seoul that have happened in South Korea over the last couple weeks, shows how globally we can come together for the greater good and put aside our differences and come together and be great. I just want to clarify with what's been proposed today, that we're acknowledging that there's a growth in sports, not just baseball, but I think it's all sports across the board. Cricket has over 500 members in their cricket club. Soccer has around 3,000 members in their cricket club. Tennis is thriving. Hockey is, I don't know the numbers with hockey specifically. I know baseball is almost at 1,000 members last year, and if we continue to grow, could double, could triple. So going forward, I think it's important to separate the growth that we're acknowledging here today and the Waterloo Park Master Plan from 2009. And I have a recommendation to make amendments to the Waterloo Park Master Plan from 2009, specifically in reference on page 17. Land use is 2.3.3. The current point recommends explore opportunities for more unstructured free leisure play by phasing out of organized sports in the park, soccer, baseball, and cricket. Organized sports would be relocated only if an alternative location becomes available elsewhere and the relocation is supported by the Rec and Leisure Master Plan. So my recommendation is to change the phrase of phasing out of organized sports and make the amendment so that it states, explore opportunities for more unstructured free leisure play. Secondly, to ensure long-term growth and security to our local minor sports associations, I propose to offer a 100-year lease to the existing sports organizations of baseball, softball, soccer, cricket. This agreement will be similar to what is currently in place with the Waterloo Tennis Club. This will allow sports, culture, and education to thrive through the next century as it has for the last century. Thirdly, if amendments are made to the project with a team of professionals, I will provide the City of Waterloo consulting services and donate 100% of the fees, which has been in the $120,000 range in the report. I would donate that money to minor sports organizations. The funds will be to contribute funding to assist low-income families with assistance needed to enroll their children in sports. Ultimately, we want to be proud of our city, and working together with local businesses and public organizations, we can do that. A private-public project will provide children the opportunity to play in great facilities. We can do better. Our facilities here in Waterloo are amazing, and if you look out at Rim Park, I remember when I was playing, I was a young athlete with Team Canada, and I was one of the first users of Rim Park. There was nobody out there in the big outdoor field, or the indoor field, and I was doing my long toss, I was taking my ground balls, I was able to do my BP back then, and the facility is completely filled now, right? So the investment that we made 20-some years ago is allowing our community to really thrive. I think we need to do that in Waterloo Park. It's fantastic what's what's on the table right now with fields 3 and 4. And I think the entranceway to Father David Bauer Drive would be just immaculate if we were to create a world-class facility. So when people come to Waterloo, they're going to leave with an amazing impression. Today is the day that we claim ownership of our potential. Behind every door is magic, sparking opportunity. Every step leads to a path that leads to a choice. You see, we're looking for something different. We're searching for change, to take charge. So let's take a stand and demand that change. It is time for us to transform into the glow of our imagination. It takes a planet and grit to move mountains. Dive into duty, fall into action, walk through the door of opportunity and realize that this is our beginning. Let's come together and make this dream reality. Thank you. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for your constructive ideas today, Aaron. Questions from Council? Councillor Burke.
I admire your passion, Aaron. I really do, and your desire to want to find more places for kids to play, more opportunities for kids to play. So from that, I can assume that these plans for these diamonds are something that you think are going to help kids learn to have a place to play? The ones that are in front of us tonight?
More facilities are going to help sustain baseball's growth and softball's growth. I think we need to look at softball as well, right? When we have to look at the equation for the girls to have the opportunity for equality. Should start at a young age, not when they become an adult. We should be teaching them, giving them, providing these facilities from a very young age. And I think that I think we need to work together to make sure that we get this right. There were some concerns from the community, and I think that we have some great people here to make this project a great success. I think. To acknowledge the concerns in the communities, we should work with them to make sure that they're happy, because if those people are happy in the communities, then we have nobody to convince about this project. So I think what's being offered today for the growth of the sport is fantastic.
And I recognize, Aaron, that you still have your concerns, and as well-founded as they may be about Diamonds 1 and 2 and their future, etc., and what that means to Waterloo Park. But I do value your opinion when it comes to, the changes in the other two diamonds in Waterloo Park. That, when I look at that picture and I look at the changes that are proposed, that seems to me to be a really good use of that piece of land, because right now they're not as usable as they could be. And but I just wanted to ask you if you felt these were something that could certainly help the growth, and you've answered it. So thank you.
Okay. I don't see any further questions from Council, but what I will say is that your two areas of commentary on the Waterloo Park Master Plan, I'll ask staff to refer that to our Citizens Committee, the Waterloo Park Committee, for information, as well as for our staff to consider the idea that you proposed here tonight regarding the diamonds there. So I'll look up to the Commissioner to take notes. He is. And so with that, thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Next up, delegation number 2, Sebastian Fischmeister. Welcome, Sebastian.
All right, honorable council members, honorable Mayor Jaworski. First, I would like to thank all of you for the service that you do for the community and all the effort and time that you put into this, because when I look at today's packet of 223 pages, I understand that it's a time-consuming work and that you really rely on accurate and precise information that is given to you in order to make the decisions. And that is exactly what I'm here, because I'm concerned about the accuracy and the report that you have in front of you there. You have essentially a failed report. A report that failed to use proper mechanisms and methods to prepare the decision that you are going to make. And you are being asked to make a decision on this failed report. As a background, I'm an associate professor at the University of Waterloo. I teach and research in the area of safety critical systems. So I analyze the safety of systems in the engineering area. I'm also, like for example, some honorable members here, a licensed engineer, and thereby I look into aspects of, for example, engineering and safety and understand what it takes to claim due diligence for a particular system. And due diligence is what all of you should be striving for when you look at the reports and when you try to make your decisions. And so here I'm here to report, by looking at this report, that it was not done with the proper care, and that anyone with Google and 1 hour of time could easily poke holes into this particular report that was given to you. So let's have at it and take a little look here. First of all, the city reports it's a cookie cutter project. It's a cookie cutter project like, well, another baseball diamond. This was done on the record by, this was said on the record by Mark Dykstra on February 22nd. He let us tape the meeting. It was also reported to me by Francis Reyes, and it was also mentioned by Jim Bowman on numerous meetings. So let's look where it's really so cookie cutter and not a problem at all. Well, the interesting thing is that baseball actually has the second highest rate of fatalities in the age group of 5 to 14-year-olds. And that was reported in 2004 by the US National Safe Kids campaign. And so just claiming that it's a cookie cutter thing and there's no problem at all with all of this and it's perfectly fine is not really an argument that you can make in this case. Actually, 25% of all injuries in the US that were reported on nearly 400,000 documented cases were due to baseball in the particular area. So taking it easy is clearly not what we should be doing. Second, when you look at the concern at the report, you can see that traffic and safety is not a concern. Well, if you look at one of the slides, the school and the parking lot didn't even fit on that graphic anymore. So here we have, especially in the Lowerwood area, a parking lot that is 400 meters away and a parking opportunity that is 40 meters away. And so the question is, of course, well, is that safe? Is it a sane thing to claim, or not sane, well, is it a good thing to claim as a possible solution that the parking lot 400 meters away is the right parking lot and will keep the community safe? And actually, you could even think that it makes it worse, because parents who are late to the practice will show up closest to the spot where they have to drop off the kids, which is right next to Gatestone Boulevard and the entrance of the park. And so you can, for example, look at experts like Dr. Marshall, who is a medical director for sports in the medicine program for child healthcare in Atlanta in the US, who claims that students and parents are often excited about arriving at the sports venue and have a tendency to run between parked cars without looking both ways. Well, if they arrive late, close to Gatestone Boulevard, they will just rush across the streets as they drop off the kids. But that's just one expert, right? We might just dismiss him. So let's look at a couple of other facts there. The US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and Transport Canada publish accident statistics. And in 2005, 25% of all the accidents with kids of age 0 to 14 happened at scenarios that you are going to create right there on Gatestone Boulevard. Because that includes accidents with motor vehicle collisions like dart-outs, like dashing, drivers failing to yield, backing on the driveway and traffic ways. Again, you are creating a potential hotspot for accidents, for pedestrians, right there by claiming that the parking lot that is 400 meters away solves the problem of safety in this particular case. Transport Canada reports 1,000 accidents a year in that particular age group. That means 250 kids each year, by the way, with multiple fatalities coming to accidents at scenarios exactly like the ones that you're creating there on Gatestone Boulevard if you want to put a diamond there. So clearly the report is not necessarily complete in that sense, and the suggestion might make it even worse. Claim number 3. The claim was made that, oh, we have investigated safety and have not found it to be a problem. That claim was made by Mark Dykstra in the meeting on February 22nd on record in front of a number of residents. Well, the question is it really so easy to build a diamond, and is safety really no concern at all there? 7% of all sports injuries happen because of inadequate facilities. That's an analysis of over 1,000 accidents that happen in Europe in the sports area. So understanding whether a T-ball field is going to be safe is much more than taking a couple of measurements. So let's look again at the literature, what the experts say in that area. And for example, again, Dr. Marshall states that it's critical to analyze environmental effects to, for example, sample the turf, analyze ambulance access, and establish and potentially analyze shelters for heavy weather. The analysis and criteria that the city posted on November the 6th does not include any of these things. It includes a lot of landscape elements, which might be okay, but it does not include any of these safety things. And so when I looked at that and I attended February 22nd, I wondered, okay, so how did they analyze the safety? What processes did they follow? Did they actually look at the state of the art? Did they consult any recent documentation on how to assess the safety of a T-ball field? And that's where I asked Mark on February 22nd, and I got the following answer, which I can quote to you, and we have on record. People, with respect to analyzing safety, people sat in a room and talked. But if you're looking for meeting minutes on the analysis of any of these concerns, which are listed in the appendix, I don't have any. So that means somebody sat in a room over coffee, talked to somebody about concerns, and then in the end he concluded it's safe. Nobody wrote down what was discussed, who discussed it, how they discussed it, who even participated in these discussions, and what the arguments were made. There is no structured process that was put in place to understand whether there are any safety concerns about this. Is that how the material is prepared for the council? Mayor Jaworski, is that how you hold the city to a standard to prepare the material when we talk about safety and security for the kids here in the city? By the way, even Francis Rees agreed with me on a call on Friday that written notes and clear documentation would have created an information trail and more efficient process. In verbatim, he said, I agree 100% with this being meeting minutes that are declared and handed over, besides written notes, should have been done. Several of the council here in the city are engineers by training, are graduates from engineering places, and also practice engineering. All of you are leaders that understand how intelligent decisions are formed. By approving this report and making a decision based on this report, you essentially approve the methods that the city has used to prepare this particular report. You approve that the state of the art in Waterloo to make these decisions is to not document processes, to not document decisions, and to basically write in the report whatever you discussed over a coffee at a table and within a couple of outreach elements. I, as an engineer and concerned resident in the city, object to this practice, and so should actually, in my opinion, all of you. So I would like to urge you to vote no on this particular report, to vote no because as a city and as councillors and as a mayor, you have the right to get a report that follows standard practices, that follows the state of the art, where people consult the literature of how to analyze these things and how to prepare these reports. Vote no because this particular process should be restarted and should get done right. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Sebastian. Did Councillor Doyle, did you have your hand up earlier? Or
So
is it a question of staff or delegation?
It's at the delegation. I think I'm just not clear. So the statistics that you're bringing forward is that kids die when they cross streets. Is that like, what was this? What are the, like, I don't understand what you're,
Yes.
I mean, I understand you're excited, and so, but I'm just trying to find the points you were trying to make there.
Okay. So for the record, I'm not excited for kids crossing the streets and dying.
No, not excited. Your voice was excited.
Okay.
I just want some of your points really, so I understand what exactly you're saying here.
All right. And I'm happy, by the way, to provide the background material in the end then.
That would be fantastic, because I just did a Google, and one of the things that I learned was that the ball is actually soft. T-ball is played with a safety ball. It's sponge rubber center. So I'm not sure where your fatality statistics in minor baseball are concerned, but in T-ball, it's. I mean, as far as my Google is telling me, it's one of the safest sports you can put a little 7-year-old in. And the bats are different too.
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about, right? T-ball.
So the statistic that I cited is from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Okay.
This is about street accidents.
Street safety, got it.
And it's not about kids getting hit by the ball.
Okay.
And there you can see exactly the flaw, for example, in that particular part of the report, because if everybody is concentrated about the T-ball aspect and about whether the ball can fly over there and hit the child, then that's not the whole complete picture. The picture is parents arriving potentially late to the sports event, trying to quickly drop off their kids there, overlooking potential other kids that have to cross the road.
Do you have kids?
Yes.
Do you have kids that are 5 years old?
Yeah. Well, no more.
6, 7?
Yes. Yes.
So when they're 5, 6, 7, you don't pull over and drop them off. You park the car and you get out and you walk them, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's going to be no frantic caravans rolling in with children flying out the side. When we're talking about T-ball here, so you're going to get out and you're going to open the door and you're going to hold your kid's hand as you go in. I mean, I know because my kid is that age, and I would never let my kid fly out the side of a door. Because we're talking about 8-year-olds and under, right?
Yes, if you
So
right
let's make
now...
sure we get our statistics right.
Yes, and if you right now can make a statement for all parents in the Kitchener-Waterloo area that they will all follow this particular aspect, then I would agree with your statement.
But you're making statements that they're all going to do the opposite.
Let's just have questions.
I'm happy to have an argument there because it's essential.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not making a statement about parents kicking out their kids out of the car and saying, there you go, survive as you cross the road.
Okay.
Because the statistic that I have from the US as well as Canada includes also the parents and not only the kids. And so when you look at, for example, dart outs in front of cars, if you look at drivers failing to yield in scenarios, that doesn't matter whether there was a kid there or whether there was a parent together with the kid. The number that I give you is the number of accidents that happened with kids involved in there. So that means there can be parents as well. The number that I gave you just counts the kids.
Okay.
And so even you will have the scenarios, even when the parent is there, because when you look at, for example, experts like Mr. Marshall, he specifically states that not only kids are getting excited, also parents get excited about the T-ball games of their kids.
Sure.
And so also parents do not necessarily follow all the rules and everything they should do when they try to cross the roads in particular scenarios.
So for you, this is all about the safety of Gatestone Drive. That's 100% your argument, 100%.
Unfortunately not. What I pointed out is that this is one element, because I spent an hour on this. I did not spend the whole time on it, and I did not donate as much time as, for example, the previous speaker to it. This is just one part, when you look at it, where you immediately see a problem. Where the city clearly has not followed the process and has prepared a report in the way that they have prepared the report. If you look at others, if you give me another hour on a particular other issue, then who knows what comes up there.
I know, I get it. I mean, I have engineers that I work with on this council. I know they could dig into anything. I get that. Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to ask a question of staff then to redirect for you.
Let me just see if there's further questions at council. Seeing none. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fischmeister.
Okay, so I guess my question to staff is, are you familiar with some of the statistics, and would it be helpful for you in the future, because we can get those stats?
Through Mayor to Councillor Durrell, we always welcome taking feedback and receiving such statistics to help improve safety of kids and community members. So whether it's related to playground safety, which our team, Parks team, is very concerned about and does audits on and review, how we use information to better design our fields moving forward, how we program these fields, we definitely welcome these considerations.
Councillor Freeman.
It would seem to me too that we might have some opportunities to look at our own statistics, because we have a tremendous amount of sports fields that are programmed into neighborhoods just like this one is. I can think right off the bat, the N.A. McEachran soccer fields, they're located near the back of the school lot. It's really common for parents to drop off on the private street, then drive the car about to the school parking lot. So maybe we can check in, see if we've had any concerns in our area. And then, of course, we have a lot of excited children that run off to school in the morning and parents that always have to drive them. So it would seem to me that we probably have a fair bit of statistics on children under the age of 8 being dropped off by parents for school. So we can have a look at that. And if we did believe that it was a problem, could we not put no stopping signs along Gatestone Drive as a part of this approval?
Yes, through the Mayor to Councillor Freeman. Yes, we will look at our statistics and what our team has experienced in terms of feedback in regard to safety of our program diamonds and fields, and as well as we'll reach out from my commission to integrated planning and public works and discuss about school zones as well. So we can do that, Councillor. We can, if you could just repeat your last question, sorry.
It was just whether or not we could actually put no stopping signs along Gatestone and seek to enforce that for the beginning of the season to help prevent programming people from using that space.
Yes, so that is an option before us. Our recommendation would be to try to utilize the parking at Laurelwood School and the schools prior to limiting parking, no stop zones. That limits other folks as well if they want to use those areas, and that can create a challenge too for the neighborhood residents doing just their own use as well. So if my recommendation to council would be to just review, and if we feel that need, we will work to look at those improvements along the park frontage.
Okay, thank you. Next up on the list, Mark Scram, President, Waterloo Minor Baseball.
Good evening. My name is Mark Schramm from Waterloo Minor Baseball. I'm the president. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. Firstly, I realize it's been well documented, the growth in baseball in the last few years. We've absorbed a 70% increase in that time. And I'm very proud to say it took a lot, but we didn't turn anybody away last year. But we are busting at the seams. In our very young division, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, we had teams intermittently playing indoors last year, which was not the best scenario and very expensive, but we felt it was better than turning them away. The addition of East Bridge and Gatestone would allow for another 100 players to play this year, and not to be to correct you, Mr. Dykstra, but they are 5, 6, and 7. We would never let an 8-year-old play T-ball. And for those of you, when I see this conversation around the diamond size and where balls could go, and please take this in the spirit it was intended. If you've never seen a T-ball game, you don't have to worry about anything more than about 5 feet behind you, because there is no pitching. Okay, foul balls come from guys firing it in there, it's fouled off, it goes boom, and it breaks a window, or it hits a kid in a little playing on a slide behind whatever. It's impossible. It's mathematically impossible to foul a ball off in T-ball. The obvious fact is that at that age they don't hit it very far. I think that's pretty well known here. What we are asking for in our discussions involving these two diamonds is Monday to Thursday from 6 till 8 o'clock. And as Mark said, a few minutes of travel time. And I can tell you at House League, they're not getting there an hour early and they're not staying till 9. In fact, these games are actually an hour and 45 minutes. So when I say 2 hours, we're already allowing for a little extra time on both sides. Monday to Thursday for 2 hours is 8 hours a week for 10 weeks. It's 80 hours. So I ask Council to consider this. If you humor me here on some simple math, there's 24 hours in a day, there's 168 in a week, there's roughly 8,500 in a year. We're asking for 80. Less than 1% of that time will be used, and this will keep me from having to say no to 100 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. I don't mean this to make it a teary-eyed speech, but we are in a growing city. We have light rail transit coming on. We are building high-rises. We have, 30,000 university students. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening here, and we haven't seen a new baseball diamond in a long time. This is a great step. The Waterloo 3 and 4, as well as Rim 4, 5, and 6, those are of great help. We don't know what the future will bring, but this simple plan and these neighbors giving up their park for, like I said, they can have it the other 99% of the time. Any big city, and I'm going to use that term, the city hasn't always been this big. I've spent my entire life here. And this region has more than 500,000 people. When you go to a bigger city, there is some congestion, there is some problems. And there's expensive real estate. And as Aaron pointed out, one of the most important things we can have is some activity. We just don't want people sitting in their houses, especially kids. So your support on this matter would be greatly appreciated. It's supported by Waterloo Minor Baseball, and I thank you for all your work today.
Thank you very much, Mark. I have questions here from Councillor Freeman and Councillor Burke.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just wanted to understand, so if I heard you correctly, there's only going to be one game per each night? So there's no transition of another team, is that right?
That's correct, one game a night.
And then, so how many children are typically on a team?
12 it would be the norm at that age, although we went to 13 last year just so everybody could play. But
so potentially 26 cars?
12, no, it would never, if we get these 2 diamonds, there won't be 13 kids on the t-ball team.
Okay, so maybe 24 cars?
Yes.
Total?
Correct.
With no transition? They come, they go?
Right.
So...
just like if they were going to a house party.
Right, but sometimes with soccer you've got the games back one after the other So you have this transition that happens between games where you've got 24 cars coming and 24 cars leaving, but you're telling me that's not going to happen.
No, that's not, and I will just jump in here. There was some thought about a rain date, and we are having conversations at our board level about not having rainouts rescheduled on weekends for House League, simply because it was our single worst no-show rate, was when we rescheduled. So I would say it's very unlikely that we would ever be there on a weekend. This is a relatively new development, and the other thing, I'm sorry, I apologize, but I neglected to mention this. You did give me the mic again.
Sorry.
So.
Please continue.
But you have my promise that if baseball were to expand and we rekindled a summer league or something, it's never going to affect these 2 diamonds. There will never be baseball here past that very early in July period. This will be the first place we would leave. And you will never have House League kids playing an 8 till 9:30 game. That's not happening. There's no lights there. So, and it won't go past July 10th because there's lots of other places we can go later in the year. Anyway, sorry, I got off track there.
And the only other question I had, in the history that you've been involved with the sport, do you know of any collisions, any concerns, any accidents that have happened with your players transitioning from their vehicles to your fields?
Not that I can recall. And my son has played through the system, and I coached 30 years ago for 6 years. I don't ever recall an incident like that. I think, I'm sorry I don't know the name, but as this councillor pointed out, people tend to be pretty careful with their kids in those scenarios.
Next up, Councillor Burke, please.
Just a couple of questions based on concerns. One concern is noise. Now, there's going to be noise. We know that. I coached girls for 15 years, and they enjoy rhyming cheers.
The boys are much quieter.
Are they? Well, I knew that. I just simply didn't want to say it. But there will be noise. Obviously, there's the sound of bat on ball. There's people doing that, and there's not much that you can, nor would I really want you to do to mitigate that. So we'll leave that aside. A couple other questions, though. One is about garbage, which I think is really legitimate because, from my experience, the city or the region, who's ever responsible for it, doesn't necessarily do a really good job of picking up garbage in its parks on a timely basis. If there's going to be teams there 4 nights a week, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we have those garbage cans emptied, or what I would really prefer to see is you leave the park the way you found it. Now, I don't know what kind of power you have with your parents, but when they bring all their snacks for their children, it would be really nice if they took out the garbage with them I think that's something that would be worthwhile because quite simply, we don't do a very good job of emptying our garbage cans. So can you speak to that maybe brand new Waterloo Minor Baseball Waste Management Plan that you didn't know you had?
Well, as I've mentioned before, it is House League, and it is little guys. So what that means is, for a lot of the people, this is their first experience, and you're generally talking about parent coaches. And these are the kind of things that we go through in our code of conduct that we give to everybody. But of course, we're talking about hundreds of volunteers, many of which are recruited at the 11th hour, and we do our best. And they are responsible adults. These are citizens of Kitchener-Waterloo, mostly Waterloo, that will be playing on these diamonds. So it's not, you're not bringing them in from afar. They're not, they didn't travel 2 hours and eating in the car and bringing a bunch of that kind of thing. So we do address that, of course, but I don't think that's going to be a big problem here. It's not adult diamonds. There's no coolers coming there. You know what I mean?
So what can you do to address the concerns of the people who live along Gatestone that there will be cars parked there? Is there anything Waterloo Minor Baseball can do, even if that means just posting someone to say, let's move along, here's where the parking is, or anything minor baseball? Because I know you've run into this before.
Certainly. Of course, we would suggest it, and I think we're all humans here. It was mentioned, and rightfully so, people will be late and whip in, and this is a little quicker, and I get that. We fully intend to ask the people to park at that school. And I'm not here to give you advice, but I would suggest that if you had no parking within maybe 20 yards of that entrance, that you would mitigate that problem right there. You would eliminate the laziness. Of course, that would inconvenience the actual residents themselves because they wouldn't be able to use it for their own parking, but that would keep them from everyone stopping at that time and then taking off. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
2 more delegations. John McCarthy up next. Welcome, John. You'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mayor Jaworski, members of council, friends and neighbors, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the pending outdoor sports field strategy implementation, to which I and dozens of my neighbors are very much opposed. My wife and I moved into Laurelwood 24 years ago this May. We live on Gatestone Boulevard, directly across the street from Laurelwood Park. This park was a huge selling point and one of the reasons why we bought in Laurelwood. As you might imagine, our proximity to the park has had its ups and downs over the years. We raised 2 kids who practically lived at the playground, playing on the swings and equipment. They also skated, and they even played pickup baseball on the scrub diamond there. The downside of living there has been nightly summer fireworks, the garbage left behind by drunken partiers, and the inevitable graffiti and damage done, whether to my home and cars or those of my neighbors. Parking congestion on our street during events like the fireworks at Columbia Lake is also a nightmare. Mr. Mayor, I am not opposed to kids playing baseball. Both of our kids played in the WNBA system. My son even played AAA ball for Waterloo for a few years. As I stated, though, I am opposed to this idea. Gatestone Park is not a park for program baseball. It's for everything and everybody. People don't drive there. They walk, bike, or scooter there. They fly kites and drones and run and train dogs there. They swing and dangle from the monkey bars. It's a small neighborhood park. What I'm opposed to is the idea of turning this park into something it's not, and for 2 very good reasons. First and foremost, the issue of safety. Safety for the kids, and yes, even the adults. Things have changed a lot since my kids used the park. Gatestone was a safe street back then. There simply wasn't the same volume of traffic. Now it could take me a few minutes before I can even safely back out of my driveway. It also takes a lot more agility and wits to cross Gatestone Boulevard on foot. Today I can't walk across the street to get my mail from the box in front of the park without having to stop and wait for cars. Cars are traveling at high speeds coming out of the curve from Columbia Street, thinking more about their shortcut to Fisher-Hallman to escape the lights than the possibility ahead that people are crossing the road. Couple this then with the possibility that little ones coming out from between parked cars to head to the playground or the diamond if this idea passes, and I believe that we have the recipe for a disaster. There have been no traffic safety studies to my knowledge which takes this into account. We were told at a prior meeting that this argument is a non-starter because no one has ever been hit by a car on city streets. It's not an issue. This is truly what we were told. This is obviously a total falsehood. A young Wilfrid Laurier student was killed by a car in December 2014 at Gatestone and Fisher-Hallman. Last week we were informed that if the city puts the diamond in, it will be up to the parents and caregivers to ensure the safety of the children. While we do have to teach our children about traffic safety, I don't agree with cavalierly putting people in possible harmful situations, whether on the street or in the park itself, just to get the project off the desk of whomever is in charge, especially when no studies have been done to ensure that this scheme is even safe. No matter what we learn or decide tonight, the safety of the citizens of Waterloo have not been considered in this plan. I believe the neighbors in Eastbridge have the exact same fears. The second thing I take issue with is how all of this was presented to us and how poorly we the affected citizens have been represented. Your professional team that put this report forward has done all of the citizens of my neighborhood in Waterloo a terrible disservice, and if this is the way the city business is done day in and day out, then I believe that all of the good people living in this city are being treated like fools. I learned of the first meeting regarding the idea of putting program baseball across the street quite by accident. I believe it was in the record in January 2017. A first meeting was scheduled sometime after this, and none of us were alerted. This is a problem that even your own employees acknowledged. Why wasn't I informed by the city about a meeting regarding something that was changing within feet of my house? Some would imagine it's because they wanted as little opposition as possible. At the first meeting, Mr. Mayor, we were taken through the idea, but we absolutely were assured that nothing was formalized. Laurelwood was just one of a handful of sites being considered. The denials that the decision was already made were common at every one of the next meetings until last week. Even as late as July 2017, emails from Mr. Burke and Mr. Griffin both assured me that this was not a done deal. This is quite interesting, though, because it was on January 16, 2017, in a report authored by Mr. Griffin and sent to Council under the heading Proposed Works in 2017, where he lists investigate programming and design needs at the following diamonds to help facilitate the reallocation of programming at Waterloo Park. A, Eastbridge Green, B, Laurelwood Park. And in April 2017 states, upgrading ball diamonds, including Eastbridge Park and Laurelwood Park, will take place to improve the quality of these diamonds, increase usability, and support a redistribution of needs throughout the city's existing ball diamond inventory. It goes on to say under the same date that when the Eastbridge and Laurelwood Park diamonds are upgraded. The devil is in the details here. The words when and will cannot be massaged. No other parks or venues were being considered at all as early as January 2017, even though we were told the opposite for months. If there were other options, why were they not listed in the reports? We were being lied to by your city staff. It's hard to fight City Hall, Mr. Mayor, and it's even harder if you're blindfolded and both hands are tied behind your back. So shame on me for missing this and for not reading the website. I guess I trusted what I was being told. Shame on the city too, then, for stringing well-meaning and trusting citizens along. The city staffers obviously had every intention of forcing this and had no intention of listening to the citizens.
I'll ask you to speak to the facts, please. What you're saying is not acceptable in this council chamber, so can you just speak to the facts as you were before?
Can you tell me, sorry, what was I saying that wasn't factual?
Just when you call people liars, that's, I could cut off your microphone now. Could you just finish up, please?
Well, what would you like me to say? I was at the meetings, sir, you weren't there.
You finished?
I wasn't finished, no.
Please continue, but be respectful in this chamber.
At the last meeting,
it helps you speak to facts or speak to policies and procedures.
I was at the meetings, Mr. Mayor. You weren't. Okay, so you don't know. You obviously don't know what the facts are. If I'm wrong, I can be refuted.
Please continue. You have 4 minutes.
At the meeting last week, your team was roundly scolded by my frustrated neighbors for their evasiveness and general demeanor. While they are a likable group, it's very hard to sit for almost 2 hours while they shrugged their shoulders and smiled, especially after learning that the proposal was sent to council earlier that day. This third meeting was billed as an information night. Why such a get-together scheduled after the report was already tabled? To stymie debate, of course. The thinking of the problem was probably that once we learned that we'd been hoodwinked for months, we'd just give up and go home. The entire process has greatly outraged my neighbors who have filled my inbox with very angry responses to the idea of even showing up here tonight. Showing up supporting democracy shouldn't have been quashed by the frustration that the system has caused. I hope that suppressing debate by causing the citizens of this great city to abandon their right to speak up because of a feeling of general futility isn't the MO of this council and staff. Here are a few more things that were articulated previously by City Waterloo officials that were contradicted in the last meeting. We were first told that this has everything to do with the changes at Waterloo Park. Close 2 diamonds, domino effect, need 2 more. The City of Waterloo website under Outdoor Sports Field Strategy, though clearly states, the city is undertaking a process to identify possible opportunities to relocate ball diamonds 1 and 2 from Waterloo Park to other locations in the city. Now we've been educated that this has nothing to do with the closure of 2 diamonds at Waterloo Park, and we were told by your representatives to stop coupling the 2 ideas together. We're further advised that this has everything to do with higher demand, 100 kids who won't be able to play baseball if we protest the scheme and succeed. Again, not because of any closures. Also, it was first stated this program was for 8 to 14-year-olds. Now we're updated that the programming is for T-ball 5 to 7-year-olds. We're also told by a member of your staff the site could really only handle small kids. This was met with general skepticism because many of the adults present had played on the diamond with the kids, and in the summer many older teenagers use it for pickup games. That field is absolutely large enough for adult games. We have the guarantee, though, by one of your staff that while they're in their job, it will be a T-ball only diamond. When this was stated, somebody at the meeting decided it was time to start recording the conversations. The other night we were informed St. Nicholas School in Laurelwood, which by the way is the perfect spot, can't be used because they might someday put portables there. Not impossible, but highly improbable, considering how mature the school is and how far the portables would be from the school if they are placed where the current excellent ball diamond sits. Why wasn't this looked at more seriously? The diamond is great and it has its own parking lot. At the same meeting, it was described that all parking would be done 300 meters away at Laurelwood Public School. It was then acknowledged that this probably won't work because it's too far away and Gatestone Boulevard street parking is just 200 feet away. To alleviate this, we were told that they could put up no parking signs on Gatestone to force the use of the school. It would be up to us to police this by calling bylaw officers in every night. With this arrangement, we wouldn't be able to park in front of our homes either. So, Mr. Mayor, what is the real plan? All of the above offers to change things happened after the plan was submitted to Council for your vote. How can you and Council vote on a funding plan with no idea what the final proposal is? How do we know what is in the final report? How do we know what is in the report in front of you is actually what might happen if you vote for it? We all learned firsthand that this is a moving target and none of the pieces are set in stone. Wouldn't this cause you to put the brakes on this plot just to see something more concrete? Above all, Mr. Mayor, how can you vote for this plan after learning that your staff... No, I won't say that.
It's a good choice.
Yeah. In closing, I would ask that any decision regarding changing our quiet neighborhood park into program baseball 4 nights a week be deferred until after the next election, as I and many of my neighbors feel that we have been underrepresented. Our councillor, Mr. Bork, doesn't even live in our ward anymore, and to my knowledge didn't attend any of the formal meetings with the park about the park in Laurelwood, even though he was invited. Mr. Bork did attend a meeting held in the ward that encompasses Eastbridge, who are fighting the same battle as we are. In fairness, he did come out to the park on Gatestone one afternoon last December, which was appreciated, but it was 4 p.m. and quite blustery, so many of the neighbors couldn't attend. It is the belief of my neighbors that we needed a better advisor and advocate at council and didn't have one. Mr. Mayor and council, please don't rubber stamp this just because bureaucrats know that you will. None of you live in our neighborhood, so you really haven't got any idea what we'll go through if this isn't planned properly. It would also be nice in this day and age to see decency, fairness, and truth prevail. Thank you.
Questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
With respect to questions of staff, just on St. Nicholas on Laurelwood Drive, could we have more information on that site?
Yes, through Mayor to the Council, that is a separate school-owned site, and within the sports field strategy, it speaks to us as a city utilizing our own sites prior to school sites. Yes, we do have school sites that we partner on. But in terms of investment and improvements, I compare it to the desire of you on your own property wanting to build a pool or do some landscaping in the backyard. You would desire to do that on your own property versus renting and installing the pool on another property. With that in mind, it limits our control in the future to have access. One of the bigger challenges we have in terms of access for maintenance is restricted hours on when our crews can do grooming, garbage pickup, other maintenance pieces on the site. With not owning the property, it does limit our control ultimately of what can be done on those diamonds. So those are the key points why we recommend Laurelwood versus St. Nicholas.
Okay. Any further questions before we get up to the next one? Seeing none, last delegate, Eric Nadeau, please. Register today, so 5 minutes, please.
All right, well, thank you, Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue. I think Sebastian and John already did a pretty good job talking to the issue that I came here to talk about today, which is the issue of safety on Gatestone Boulevard. I'll touch on that briefly. From my perspective, Gatestone Boulevard is a throughway from Fisher-Hallman to Columbia. It's not just used by local residents, and the city actually has, or the street has quite a bend leading up to Laurelwood Park. And what often happens is when cars are driving through there, they're driving very quickly. So when we went to the 4 or 5 meetings that have been presented, the main concern among many was about how the school parking lot is much too great a distance away from the park. When you're bringing all your bats, your bases, and all the other baseball accessories, you're not going to park 300 meters away from the diamond. You're going to park 40 meters away from the diamond. So the solution was that the Baseball Association is going to inform all of their members that they have to park at the school, but we just do not believe that that is going to be the case. We really don't believe that happening. And also as residents, we would really not like to see our whole street littered with no parking signs because we like to have company over every now and then. So I was going to speak a lot more to that issue, but I think that's really been covered. So I'd like to touch on something else, and that was about the simple math comment about 1% of the hours being used by the baseball service being done from Monday to Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Monday to Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. is more likely 5:30 to 8:30 between getting there a little bit early to set up and take down. I think like everybody else in this room, I work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 p.m., sometimes a little bit later. So that statistic is really not accurate because really my time to use the park is from about 5 to 9 p.m. When it's light out and when we're done work. So 1% of the time, it's really much higher than that. I don't have the numbers, I haven't done the math, but it's over 50% of my time. And I grew up on that park. My parents lived directly behind the diamond on Gatestone Boulevard, and I, 5 years ago, purchased a home on Berringham Place. I have a 13-week-old daughter, and up until a little over a year ago, I was really looking forward to going to use that diamond and the park in general with my daughter when I came home from work. But now it sounds like from Monday to Thursday, from 6 to 8 p.m., that's no longer going to be an option. Some 27-odd years ago, Councillor Marty Taylor promised residents in the neighborhood that that diamond was put in as a scrub diamond. It's a very small park. We have a very small parkette. It's just a couple of slides and a swing set. It's a very small park. It's not a park that's designed for scheduled programming. It's a small neighborhood park. So aside from the very obvious safety issue that I think has been well addressed here today, I don't think it's also fair to the local residents. I know often it's been talked about the greater good. It's not just about the residents. So I really feel as though the issue that we could stand on is the safety issue because it's not acceptable to say that they're not going to line the streets with cars and they're going to go and park 300 meters away at the school. I really don't believe that, and I think that before this report is approved, we need to have a concrete solution to that issue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. Further questions for the delegates? Seeing none, thank you. So, further questions of council before we debate, for staff before we debate this? Anybody? Any questions, staff? Councillor Durrell?
These were originally baseball diamonds. What's the history of them? Why did they go follow, and how long ago was that?
Sorry, through the mayor to Councillor Durrell, could you repeat the last part of your question?
Yeah, from what I understood, these were diamonds before, and then they went, the baseball, I guess, attendance went down, and they weren't used anymore, so they grew over, and then...
Yes. So for Eastbridge Green, there was programming on that diamond, and it reduced over time, and until it was the conditions were not prudent for use. With respect to Laurelwood, baseball has been. The diamond was built there as part of the original subdivision, my understanding, and at no time was there officially programming on that site. We, however, have programmed for soccer and ultimate frisbee on that site in the back of that park. So that's the history on the use for both those.
Councillor Whaley up next, please.
So I've only been on Gatestone a couple of times, and it was always quiet when I was there. But I hear from residents that it's now a cut-through street. It gets lots of traffic. Have you done any documentation on that? Has there been a traffic study with respect to volume of traffic? With respect to traffic speeds? Do we have some kind of data analytics to help us understand the, if it's really safe to have people parking there?
Through the mayor to Councillor Whaley, my understanding is there has been traffic studies done in the past with speed devices on there. I don't have those with me tonight, and not able to comment further on that at this time.
Did you look at these studies or have information about these studies when you were making the decision on locating this baseball diamond in the park?
Through the mayor to Councillor Whaley, the specific studies were not reviewed, but in terms of best practices from us, that's where we've recommended parking at the Laurelwood School to minimize the potential risks associated with that.
Further questions? Councillor Freeman.
If we were to approve this evening, could we also include in the approval a recommendation that we use our temporary speed bumps on Gatestone during the months of May and July, and so on either side of that space, and then sign it no parking 6 till 8, Monday to Thursday, May to July? And although I don't have an hour to commit to this, but I did find the pedestrian death review that was required by the province of Ontario, where they looked at 2000 to 2009. And at that time, the number of children that were pedestrians involved in a fatal collision between the age of 5 and 9 was 0. And between the age of 1 and 4 was 3. And when you looked at location, they weren't related to sport. And they were related to major arterial roads like a King Street. And I can't find any statistics from Transport Canada or anywhere associated with even pedestrian fatality of children in school zones. So maybe there's some implementation that we can do to address the concerns of the neighborhood related to traffic and speed management during the time of these 80 hours across the entire year that this diamond would be programmed.
Through Mayor to Councillor Freeman, if Council directs that, we can take that into consideration. We can work with Public Works, and maybe Mr. Rapp can comment further on that. But using the temporary speed bumps in that location is, from my perspective, an option. And if we post no parking in front of the park itself as a starting point, would assist in my from my perspective. So if Mr. Rapp wants to add anything into speed bumps at that location.
certainly through to council, we can take a look at that. We would engage the community as well, the exact locations and the preference of the community, but ultimately it would be council's decision, of course, similar to other traffic calming measures that we've used throughout the city.
I think we need to make sure that we understand what the problem is, and I know Councillor Burke had been looking into this for quite a while in terms of what measures we might take if we were to proceed in this area. So that might be something we'll talk about later during the motion and that. But it's good to know it's an option. It's good to know it's an option. Do you want to go?
Well, and on the list of things that I've put together to direct staff on this, thank you, Councillor Freeman, because the idea of the temporary speed bumps wasn't in that. That is among the things that I'd like to direct staff to work on, the installation of the temporary speed bumps during that time frame, from May through the middle of July. No parking signs are issued, but that becomes a burden for the homeowners too, and I certainly don't expect them to have to police that. That's wrong. That's why we have enforcement staff. So maybe we direct staff as well to apply a level of enforcement there, because we want to avoid any potential problems. I'd also look for a communication plan for users, informing them of the expectations around the use of the diamond, with particular emphasis on the designated parking area of the school. I do believe that the user group has a responsibility here, that if they are using this facility in the neighborhood, that they have a responsibility to make sure to the best of their ability that the people who are using the facility are using it properly and using it safely. I don't think that's a terrible burden on any user group, be it baseball or softball or hockey or soccer. I think that's only reasonable. I'd ask for a season-end debrief on use of the field and the pros and cons, and any further recommended changes. I'd actually ask for more frequent maintenance of the park in regard to waste removal. I've spoken to that before. I think what's particularly important is that our staff work to really expedite an agreement with both school boards to allow for greater community use and greater community access for the facilities located on school property, because it's ridiculous that we have all of these properties, which, and I agree with Mr. McCarthy, it makes perfect sense to put things at St. Nicholas School, but because of the bureaucracy that we have, we can't seem to do that in a manner that satisfies the desires of Waterloo minor baseball. And the reality is, I deeply want kids to have a place to play. I don't want a kid to go home without a place to play, because then kids get into trouble when they don't have anything to do. So we want kids to have something to do. We want kids to have the opportunity to have fun. But at the same time, I think this is not the first time we're going to run into this. We're going to run into this more and more often as we continue to grow, as we continue to get more kids, and we need to make sure we do that right. So I'd add that direction of staff to this motion to make sure that we at least try to mitigate the problems to begin with, and then commit afterwards to talking to people and saying, look, did it work? Because if we didn't, then we have to find another solution. And then long term, we need to work with the school boards, and actually both levels need to work together so that we can actually get this use in a proper way. We have a great number of diamonds. I think one of my fellow councillors told me tonight we have 20 diamonds of our own and 20 on school property. If we're using those, we're in a way better position, and as you've rightly pointed out, there are parking lots, why should we reinvent the wheel when we don't have to? So I think if I can go ahead with those directions to staff, I'd be pretty happy.
For clarity, are you moving the motion with those directions? And do those directions apply to both the T-ball parks?
I think they should.
Okay.
I don't know that the Eastbridge group has had the same concerns about safety, but I think we're looking at similar situations. So I would move the motion with those directions, but I want that actually to add something, a timely review, because that's one of the problems. So sometimes it takes way too long. So I don't want to wait until January to have a review of that season. We can have a review of that season in July or August or September when everything's fresh in everybody's minds. So a timely review and debrief of the season. And I would put it in place for both.
Okay, and I see Councillor Veith has seconded. From a commissioner perspective, are those all doable? I think we probably have to look through the transportation impacts through the transportation team to see, because maybe we're jumping to a conclusion here on signage and usage of temporary things. I think we still need some input on that.
So through Mayor to all of Council, yes, communication plan would be paramount in working in collaboration with Waterloo Minor Baseball to ensure that we outline the expectations with the use of both diamonds. The weekly monitoring as we go, that would definitely be doable. The end of season debrief, we can do that soon after the season has ended, so that's definitely doable. The maintenance and the garbage considerations definitely can be done as well. And the working with the school board, yes, both school boards, we will continue to do that and advance discussions in that regard, and appreciate the direction from council that'll help us in facilitating that, so thank you. And we will work with integrated planning and public works to confirm what mechanisms in terms of additional infrastructure is needed on that site. I think there's some further consultation required there, and we can work through that. And from the commission I represent, definitely we can assist with some ongoing enforcement if signs are posted in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Veith.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It's great to have an audience and for your passion on all this. The city's growing, and I'm really happy to see that we're spending some money on green space and upgrading a small park. And I know exactly, I've been through there several times, and it does need work. And parking is always an issue. I live in my ward, Conservation Drive. There's soccer fields that back onto there. People park in the bike lanes all summer, and I get complaints from citizens and cyclists, of course. But there's parking on the side streets. There's, you know, so I get it. Parking's always going to be an issue for people, and so is traffic. And traffic, maybe we need to look at a traffic study for that area, and perhaps we'll end up needing some traffic circles, like on Lake Louise Boulevard in Ward 3. So for those reasons, I'm supporting this, and I think it's going to be great for the kids, and I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue as people are expecting it will be. So, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further commentary, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And thank you to the team very much. Next up, 13A. This is an informal public meeting to consider draft plan of subdivision 30T-16402 and zoning bylaw amendment Z1614, 211-5881 Ontario Limited for 556, 560, and 576 Conservation Drive. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs a registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants notice of the form of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register on the desk at the back of the council chambers. The planner will now provide a brief overview of the application. Oh, welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. Before you is an application this evening for a plan of subdivision and zone change application. My colleague, Ms. Hardacre, is a little under the weather, so we're going to tag team tonight. I'll do the presentation, and Natalie will save her voice for any questions of council. So before council this evening, it is an informal public meeting for draft plan of subdivision 30T-16402, as well as zone change or zoning bylaw amendment Z1614. The properties are 556, 560, and 576 Conservation Drive, and the applicant is a numbered company. The applicant, or the property is essentially northwest of the intersection of Beaver Creek Road and Conservation Drive. It's indicated in the red line shown on the map. It's primarily comprised currently of vacant agricultural fields, as well as some open space and environmental lands in the southwest corner. To the east is Creekside Church, and to the west is Creekside Church, and to the east is the existing low-rise residential subdivision. The application is being advanced in an area, the Beaver Creek Meadows area, where there are a number of subdivision applications that are before council. These are some screenshots of the property. As you can see, looking at the lands, essentially they are crop fields currently at this point in time, designated for redevelopment in the longer term as staging of development occurs to move towards residential subdivision primarily. Within the official plan, the lands are designated in the yellow as shown as low-density residential and the green as open space. The open space is a core natural feature and does have as well some supporting natural features. There is some flood hazards on the property, and there is a future node and Special Policy Area 37 around the intersection of Beaver Creek Node and Conservation Drive, and the lands are within a designated greenfield area. Currently, the property is zoned agricultural. Historic zoning category applied to the property until it transitions to implement the current official plan. As indicated, the lands are within the Beaver Creek Meadow District Plan. Here's a shot of the district plan, and as you can see, with respect to the district plan, you've got essentially low-rise residential on the northern part of the block, a proposed school block, parkland, node in this general area, as well as some medium-density residential lands as well, and stormwater management blocks combined with the open space lands. This is the proposed plan of subdivision that is before council, again reflecting generally the concepts that are set out in the district plan. On the northern portion of the property is low-rise residential, potential school block, stormwater management facility, some street fronting townhouses in this area, as well as some back-to-back townhouses in this area, as well as medium density development in around the intersection around the node. The zoning bylaw that's before council is to rezone the property from agricultural to, with respect to the single detached dwelling areas, the northern part of the subdivision, to residential, with a number of site-specific provisions. With respect to the townhouses and back-to-back townhouses, medium density 3, recognizing that back-to-back townhouses are not currently a use that's reflected in our zoning bylaw. With respect to the proposed school, to be zoned institutional, and the environmental lands to be zoned green 1, along with the supporting natural features, and green 2 would be the zoning for the stormwater management facilities, as well as the proposed parkland. With respect to the site-specific provisions that are proposed, there are a number of site-specific provisions that are tailored to the individual residential uses proposed. With respect to the singles, to reduce the corner lot frontage from 12.5 to 12 meters, to reduce the front yard setback from 7 to 3 meters, to reduce the front yard setback the first one was to the dwelling itself from 7 to 5.8 to the garage, to reduce the flankage from 6 meters to 4 meters, to reduce the side yard from 1.2 meters on both sides to 1.2 meters on one side and 0.6 on the other side, to reduce the rear yard from 7.5 to 7, to reduce the minimum building separation from 2.4 to 1.8, to increase the maximum height from 9.5 to 11.5, which would require an amendment to the official plan if it was to be approved by council. Increased steps and walkway encroachments into the side yard from our standard 2 feet or 0.6 meters to 1 meter, and to permit the porch to encroach 2 meters into the front yard, the flankage yard, and to the side yard. With respect to the townhouse dwellings, again, a number of site-specific provisions are proposed to reduce the corner lot frontage from 11.5 to 9, to reduce the front yard setbacks from 6 to 4, to reduce the front yard setbacks from 6 to 5.8 to the garage, to reduce the flankage from 6 to 3, side yard from 1.8 to 1.5, the rear yard from 7.5 to 7, to increase the building height again from 10.5 to 11.5 meters, which again would potentially require an amendment to the official plan, increase steps and walkway encroachments into the side yard from 0.6 to 1 meter, as well as encroachments for the porch of 2 meters into the front yard flankage and side yards. For the back-to-back townhouses, as I indicated, the zoning bylaw doesn't currently recognize this particular built form, so it would be something that would need to be added into the zoning bylaw. The zoning amendment, again, would introduce a number of performance standards to define the use, as well as the requested zoning performance standards are indicated. A lot width of minimum of 5.5 meters. For a corner lot, that increases to 9 meters. Front yard setback of 3 meters. Flankage setback of 3 meters. The setback to the garage, 5.8 meters. Rear yard setback of 0, as they are back-to-back towns. Porch encroachment of 2 meters. Distance between buildings of 1.8 meters. And a building height of 13.5 meters, which again would require an amendment to the official plan. A number of studies were submitted in support of these applications. There's a planning justification analysis, preliminary servicing strategy, preliminary design for stormwater management, groundwater and surface water monitoring reports, geotechnical, engineering reports, road assessment, intersection operations, environmental impact study, as well as an archaeology assessment. All of these studies are currently under review by staff as well as appropriate stakeholders and agencies. Staff will, as I indicated, look to review the submitted studies and the reports. We will also look to the zoning with respect to the proposed performance standards and land uses to determine that they reflect the district plan and that they represent good planning. We will look at the subdivision design for a number of matters, including connectivity and methods of travel, the school block in terms of its size and configuration and functionality, as well as things like drop-off to the school property. With respect to the node, land uses, and again, connectivity, parkland, location, size, and grading. Of course, we'll look at stormwater management as part of the engineering, as well as context, ensuring that the proposed development integrates well with the surrounding lands. As I indicated, there's a number of plans of subdivision that are being advanced to lands to the east as well as lands to the south. We are working along with our colleagues and other stakeholders in public agencies, including the region, the GRCA, school board, and others. And other items that we determine through the detailed subdivision and zoning review will be identified. We will consult with the applicant as well as agencies, as well as engage the community as required. That concludes the general presentation. We'd be, as staff, happy to answer council's questions. I will hand this part over to Ms. Hardacre.
Wonderful. Good luck, Natalie. First up, Councillor Whaley, then Councillor Freeman.
Well, Natalie, I've been doing this job for a really long time, and I've never seen a case where there's been so many site provisions on every building, on every dwelling, shrinking the front yard, the backyard, the side yard, and every lot to the I've never seen it shrunk down so much, and at the same time asking for a bigger house on the lot. Has there been a case that you know of, and perhaps Joel's been around for a little longer, that you know of any other neighborhood where we've seen this request for shrinking the size of the property down to a postage stamp and putting the biggest house on top of it you can imagine? I've never heard of it before. Maybe there's another example in the city that you can point me to.
Through your Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Whaley. Not specifically that I can identify to council. I will say that a number of applications are advanced that look to tailor the zoning regulations to development. Again, these are very tailored regulations to the proposed lot sizes and the configurations of the lots, as well as the proposed land uses. So certainly they will need to be reviewed against our standards, and we want to make sure that each of the lots are functional, but they do meet some of the other objectives that are set out in the district plan, including requirements for density compliance within the broader subdivision. So there is a lot of zoning relief that's being requested. We'll have to determine the appropriateness of that for sure as part of our planning review.
I'm happy to go on record to say that I'm really surprised by this even getting to this stage, to coming forward with such a recommendation for such tiny lots that, you know, every side of the dwelling is affected, and at the same time no real increase in green space in the neighborhood itself. Seems like an average amount of green space, and so I'm putting you on notice that this is a worry that I have, and I'm sure lots of citizens will have, that we're just trying to cram. This is one of the last neighborhoods that's ever going to be built in Waterloo. When we're running out of neighborhoods, this will be one of the last ones, and it's just something that we're all going to be proud of being a part of. It's a question. That's the question I have, and I look forward to your answer as we work through the process.
Before I turn it over to Councillor Freeman, I had a question. Back-to-back townhouses, can you explain? I think that sort of falls on that. What is it? Are they attached at the back but not at the sides? Is that what that means?
In response to your question, Mayor Jaworski, essentially it is a townhouse that backs onto each other. So they have a common side wall, if you will, but they also have a common rear wall. So you have two townhouses that have a flush back-to-back situation.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Councillor Freeman, please.
I have a few questions. I hope that's
please,
okay.
go ahead.
They're process questions. I'm trying to understand. So prior to a draft plan of subdivision coming, I was thinking that we did some study in this area where we had outlined how this area would look, right? And so what was that? Was the district plan? Is that right?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, yes, the Beaver Creek Meadows District Plan was approved. It came to council and was approved by council in January of 2015. So that one slide on page slide 5. That is the district plan. So that's the land use schedule from that document that shows how the area, and in particular this site, is planned for development. So the different land uses that were proposed, it identified the general location of the park, general location of the school site, and land uses such as low density, as well as that brown area around the intersection of Beaver Creek Meadows and Conservation Drive, or Beaver Creek Road rather, and Conservation Drive as a mixed-use node, which is intended for residential and commercial and higher densities.
So when we do the district plan, we don't actually allocate like site-specific zoning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what the variances that are being asked for, they're being asked for from our general comprehensive, or like our general zoning bylaws for what, like, for example, let's look at that mixed use node. That would have been intended to have both probably ground floor commercial, second floor residential. So which bylaw are we comparing these variances against? Because this is all new. We don't actually have bylaws just for this, right?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, yes. In a sense, what they're doing is the Beaver Creek Meadows District Plan establishes densities, height requirements that are contemplated for this area. And so it is to be implemented through site-specific zoning. What the applicants have come forward with is their requested zone. So it's, in this instance, they've indicated they would like that it be implemented as residential, so the R zone for the low density, MD3, which is a current zone in our bylaw for the higher densities townhouse uses. Then they are requesting further site-specific amendments to those base zones from our current zoning bylaw. So in staff's review, we intend to not only look at what they're asking for, but the base zone that they're requesting as well from our current zoning bylaw, and comprehensively for the district as a whole understand what makes sense in creating these neighborhoods to implement these land uses that were established through the district plan.
So in some regard, the variances that are being asked for are really kind of creating a unique vision for this, that it's maybe not the best test to compare it against other subdivisions. Is that fair to say?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the concept for this subdivision, or rather, the concept for this neighborhood will be its own unique neighborhood. That was the intent of the district plan, of course, is to ensure that it's developed in a specific way, that it's a future community and it's developed as a complete community. So, of course, when we're looking at the zoning, we'll need to ensure that that zoning implements that overall goal and the overall thoughts and how this is to be developed.
And is our density requirement for this area actually driving some of those variances, meaning that we have a high density that we're requesting, so the only way to achieve that is to vary these existing things that like I'm trying to say, we're maybe not comparing apples and apples with these variances because we've set density targets here that are going to force a district, like an implementation of the district plan to achieve the density.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the density targets for this neighborhood are higher than many other neighborhoods perhaps within the city. However, what staff's responsibility will be in this instance is to ensure that the density targets are met, that higher density is located in specific areas, recognizing that lower areas are intended for lower density, and doing it in an appropriate way to ensure that this is an appropriate community.
And my last question is understanding, in some places Joel made reference to an OPA being required, sorry, it's not fair, I hate acronyms. An official plan amendment may be required in some areas. So how does that work? Because now they're in a zoning bylaw amendment process, and then would they have to go through a second process associated with an official plan amendment?
So in the instances where they are requesting a higher height that exceeds what's permitted in the official plan, if they choose to continue forward with that, they do need to apply for an official plan amendment, which would then be subject to the requirements of the Planning Act and would have to come back to council for an informal public meeting.
And so those would probably just be individual site specific. So if this process went ahead, then they might need to come back for those specific properties for the increase in height. Is that what the suggestion is?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the zoning would not be permitted to be approved if it were not in conformity with the official plan.
Councillor Reith, please.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I'm just wondering, can you tell me how is this going to transition from Ward 3, like Rideau River, Pinery Trail, and Wasaga Crescent? Are those street names going to stay the same when we get over into the new subdivision? And will the housing and the streetscape kind of transition nicely? Will it look the same? That kind of thing.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, at this point it's intended that the street names continue, to answer your first question. Secondly, going back to Councillor Freeman's questions, the zoning and how that will be implemented, one of the things that staff is looking at is the existing low-rise residential that is currently east of this draft plan, and ensuring that, the goal is if you were a car driving along those roads or a pedestrian walking along those roads, that it would be somewhat of a cohesive transition between the two plans, because of course this is the overall community as a whole that we want it to be fairly seamless in how it's designed.
Okay, I'm going to take a shot at a question here. One of the setback variances was from a 7 meter to the dwelling down to a 3 meter to the dwelling, point number 2 there. And then later on it says at the very bottom, permit a 2 meter porch encroachment into the front. So am I reading that correct, that some of the dwellings may only be 3 meters setback and there's going to be a 2 meter porch on it, leaving only 1 meter? That's correct?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, that is what they're proposing.
Is there something similar like this in anywhere that we see? I'm having problems envisioning this.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to answer the question, in a new residential subdivision, I would say no.
Seen anything in Waterloo region? Oh, I'll ask the other people. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Freeman.
I think that might be useful in the next report to get some examples of where these things have been implemented, because I would have thought that the brownstones on Park Street that were approved as part of 144 Park are likely into the encroachment zone. but I don't know without looking at a site plan.
Well, we can ask the applicant for ideas too. Councillor Whaley.
Just as a comment, some of these design features we've been talking about and the shrinkage of the lot sizes is stuff that we've never seen before. Here we are at the informal meeting. The next time we see it is at the formal meeting. And I'm suggesting, because of the uniqueness of the site-specific provisions and the number of them, is such that we might need something in the interim, so that we're not, asking these questions tonight and wondering about, the postage stamp size of this stuff that it appears to, that we don't come forward to a decision on the night of the formal meeting without any interim understanding about how this is going to evolve, and so that we're not going to be taken by surprise on that night 6 months down the road or a year down the road to see how this has turned out. Because I worry that there's so many unusual and multiple site-specific provisions here that will be taken by surprise.
Further questions from council? Seeing none, thank you both very much. District delegations,
Welcome, Kristen. Hopefully shed more light on it as well. Oh, and do you have her presentation? That would be it. Perfect.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. My name is Kristen Barrisdale from GSP Group. I'm here representing the property owner. We also have Mr. Ian Cook and John Koch here from Cook Homes, as well as Brad Tressler from Amenity Homes, who are the property owners. Ian Robertson is here from Meritech Engineering if there are any questions that come up with regards to the technical engineering reviews. And Elaine Gosnell is here from Natural Resource Solutions to answer any questions you may have about natural features. So here's a brief overview of my presentation. We did submit an original, I refer to as the original draft plan of subdivision, as part of our initial application in July 2016. Through continued discussions and correspondence with city staff, we've submitted a revised draft plan of subdivision in December of 2017. I'm going to kind of walk you through some examples of the housing types and specifically some of the zoning that you're seeing in front of you, what it actually looks like. There are some examples, not necessarily in the city of Waterloo, but here in Waterloo region. Walk you through the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. I'm just going to, again, highlight the property. Mr. Cotter did an overview of exactly where it is and what's surrounding, so I will kind of breeze over that. So this was the original draft plan application as submitted to the city. As you can see, it's a combination of single detached and townhouse development. So the single is the yellow, the townhouse development is the orange, the dark green space is the open space associated with the existing natural features that run in through the property. The blue area is stormwater management facility, the light green area is the proposed park, and the purple area was the proposed school. As Mr. Cotter touched on, there were a number of reports and studies that were prepared in support of the application. The servicings report and preliminary swim report, as well as the groundwater and surface water monitoring program. There was a district plan that was done, as discussed previously, but also as part of that process, there was a sub-watershed study that was done for the area. So all of the engineering design, groundwater and surface water monitoring program, as well as the environmental impact statement have all been prepared in accordance with the objectives and the requirements of those studies. There was also a noise impact assessment that was done, intersection operational assessment that was done. Through discussions with city staff prior to the submission of an application, it was determined that that study could be scoped down to just essentially assess traffic at Westmount and Conservation Drive, and then a plan and justification study. The original draft plan of subdivision tried to maintain the connectivity to the existing streets or roads that exist to the east of the property in Conservation Meadows. This is just a breakdown of the unit count and area types. So the original draft plan identified 478 units along with school, park, open space, stormwater management, trails, roads, and walkways. The site itself has a total size of 28.64 hectares. So through discussions with city staff, we prepared a revised draft plan of subdivision. What I'm going to do is I'm kind of walk you through it and point you into the areas where we've seen some of the more major changes in the subdivision. So the area that's highlighted right now in red at the south end, this area was revised. It's a townhouse block adjacent to the open space feature and required development setback. It was revised to more accurately reflect the wetland boundary and the required buffer. It was also revised to provide for additional secondary access to the park block. The original draft plan of subdivision contemplated a very small, more of a walkway pathway from Street E that would connect to the park. This has been enlarged to provide for more efficient and larger public access. Area number 2, there was some concerns with regards to some of the road alignments that we had, some of the curves and angles in the roads, particularly Pinery Trail because of its connection to the existing subdivision. So this road was straightened out and the park frontage of this location was widened. So the original draft plan of subdivision had about a 20-meter frontage for park along Pinery Trail, and that's now been increased to 50. The north portion of the site was redesigned first to provide for a secondary road connection to the property to the west. The original draft plan just had simply one road that would stub into the future development. As requested by city staff as well as the property owner to the west, we've provided for that second access to provide a looping. In addition, the green area that you see to the north, the single detached lots that back onto that area were slightly revised to reflect a more accurate drip line and then the appropriate development setbacks. The district plan and the original draft plan of subdivision had contemplated a trail or a walkway linkage along the north end of the property. However, through subsequent site visits, as well as site visits with staff, regional staff, and GRCA staff, there's quite a significant grade change at this location, as well as some existing natural features and good quality trees. It was determined that because of the streets running parallel to the trail and the fact that immediately north of this is agricultural land associated with the township, there's still some question as to whether or not the trail is appropriate at this location, and we continue to work with city staff on this. But as the draft plan stands right now, we've modified to remove it. The school block has been slightly enlarged, as well as slightly reconfigured to provide for the requirements of the school board with regards to primary and secondary access or secondary frontage. They require the school blocks to have full frontage on one road and about 40 to 60% of frontage on a secondary road. This is for them to make sure that they're facilitating appropriate separation from drop-offs and buses. The townhouses across from the school originally were identified as single detached units. It has since been modified to provide for street fronting townhouses. This is more consistent with what was contemplated in the district plan. The area down here was probably the area that we spent the most significant back and forth with the city about. The original draft plan had the internal road network running perpendicular to Conservation Drive rather than parallel to Conservation Drive. The units have been reoriented so that we can provide for a slightly enhanced or activated streetscape along Conservation Drive. And then it provides for a more efficient layout of the road system, particularly as it relates to the back-to-back townhouses. The red or the orange, blob that you see at the south corner originally was street fronting townhouses. Roy Schmidt Drive, as it stands today, extends out to Conservation and Drive, but the intent is that that road, as it connects to Conservation Drive, will be closed in the future. So this was redesigned to take into account taking access to a private multiple residential development off of, I think it's Roy Schmidt Drive that will curve in and around there. And then finally, the access, particularly at this intersection, had to slightly be enlarged to account for future road widenings and conveyances to the region as part of the as part of the roundabout construction. So slight change to our original context and land use schedule. The unit count has now been reduced from originally what was identified as 478 units to a range of 436 to 441 units. I'm just going to walk you through a couple of examples of products that are reflective of some of the specific zoning requests that we have asked for. This particularly pictures are located in the City of Kitchener. It's the Wildflower Subdivision at the corner of Homer Watson and Fisher Holman. It's a Amenity product. Amenity also has similar development at the south end of Kitchener, Dune South, that is reflective of some of these changes that we're asking for, particularly the side yards and the front yards, as well as two of their developments in Cambridge, one on the south side of the 401 and one on the north side of the 401. So this is an example of street fronting townhouses as exist in Wildflower. You can see, particularly on the left-hand side, the porch encroachment into that front yard. It's important to note, though, that appropriate parking spaces have to be maintained from the garage. So if you look at the zoning that we've proposed specifically, while we're allowing for the active part of the house or the livable part of the house to be closer to the street, we are by all means maintaining an appropriate driveway as well as access to a garage so that a car can be parked safely and effectively in the driveway. This is an example of their back-to-back townhouses, again, as part of Wildflower in Kitchener. So this is the end of the unit on the on the left-hand side. The right-hand side is what the front unit looks like. It's hard to tell from this picture, and it's designed that way, but the garages are recessed into the building so that they're not as prevalent at the street. They've slightly got canopied or cantilevered use above. You can see on the second story, they've got patios and private decks for each of the units because they don't technically have the backyard space that we are accustomed to as singles or townhouses. The private amenity space has been incorporated into the design of the unit. This is, again, the corner of the unit and the front of the unit. They are 3 stories in nature because of the garage, again, being recessed onto the ground floor, as you would expect. It does consume a large portion of the ground floor area. Not much livable space in that area aside from the entryway, perhaps a bathroom and storage room, and then you get into the second and the third floor, and that's the actual living space of the unit. And then this is an example of 3-story townhouses. So again, these are part of Wildflower. The active front or the active entrance to the unit that's the front. Again, elevations, and then the garage is actually at the rear of the unit. Again, with a private amenity area, porch, and a terrace that's built above the garage for those property owners. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of the site-specific zone changes that we have requested. There are a few tweaks in this presentation that are slightly different from what Natalie had presented, or sorry, Mr. Cotter had presented to you. So on the left-hand column, you'll see what is required under the existing residential zone for singles. On the right-hand column, you'll see what we're proposing. I draw your attention to the front yard setback. Our original application did request 3 meters. Through practice and experience, where we've actually recently increased that to 4 meters. But for the most part, the balance of the site-specific requests remain as Natalie had discussed. Flankage setback to the house, it's 6 meters requirement. We've also increased that to 4 meters. So this is an example of the reduced side yards. Again, this is on Wildflower and Kitchener, and these are 2 single detached houses with a 1.2 meter side yard separation. As you can see, it's quite narrow, but it has been designed to allow for appropriate infiltration. If you take a drive out to these areas, most of these circumstances are actually, they have gravel in between the houses. Whether it's 1.2 meters or 2.5 meters, I think that it's arguable as to how useful that side yard is, aside from obviously drainage and then obviously providing access into your backyard. So the intent is to take advantage of that, provide for access as needed, but maximizing the coverage on the lot. Proposed townhouse streets townhouse regulations, again, required versus proposed. I draw your attention to the front yard setback. So the minimum requirement in the zoning bylaw is 6. We've asked for 4. We had originally asked for 3. We've even increased that. And back-to-back townhouses again. We had asked for 3 minimum front yard, where we've increased that to 4. And as Mr. Cotter said, we also need to have further discussions with staff as to how exactly we're going to classify and define the back-to-back townhouses, because we recognize that they don't currently exist in the City of Waterloo bylaw. So this is the draft plan of subdivision as submitted in December as it stands right now. Again, we recognize that we're continuing to work with city staff as well as the GRC in the region, and I suspect that there will be further modifications to what you see in front of you tonight, as well as some of the site-specific zoning. And I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I think first on my list is Councillor Freeman.
It could be that my questions are better geared at staff, but I can tell you where I'm headed. So, and thank you for bringing this drawing up. I think this is the first subdivision that we've actually done like this as a council. I could be wrong, where we've taken a district plan and gone to this level of density. But there's a bunch of stuff that I feel like I've been involved with dealing with over the past 10 years that I see opportunities at this approval time to consider. So is it possible to be looking at traffic calming initiatives right from the get-go on Pinery Trail at maybe Street A and maybe Street D or B or something, and also at Street E and Street A, because we know we've got the school zone, and it seems like we always have to go in and do traffic calming measures in school zones. So in particular, raised crosswalks into those spaces. And then I had a question about the park block, and this is maybe back to Commissioner Dykstra. I didn't know if it's possible for us to design into that park block as a part of this subdivision, building out a T-ball pitch right into there, because then that might inform the site planning for the school. So, you know, maybe their parking lot could be closer to that T-ball pitch or soccer field or whatever is the right fit for that park. And then the other thing I wondered about was for these townhomes that are located on Street A, are all the driveways street facing in front of the school there? I'm just trying to get a sense of what kind of car movement happens in front of the school. And because I couldn't tell, see how you have the blocks at the back? Are those single residential blocks at the back and then towns across the Street A?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, they're intended to be street fronting townhouses on both sides.
Oh, I see.
So street fronting on Beaver Creek Drive Extension, and then street fronting on the road that's on the opposite side, that's outside of the limits of this draft plan.
Right. And to be fair, like my comments around traffic calming, I don't really know where the right place to put them is. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I'm just saying that we typically know that we run into challenges around school zones, and so there might be an opportunity as a part of constructing the road to set our minds to that. And maybe along Beaver Creek on the other side too, I don't know. But I think that there was, yeah, I think that was everything that I wanted to better understand.
I do have some questions on the in the upper left corner there, connecting streets, well, the unnamed streets. Was there thought given to a trail connecting the upper street to the lower street, so there's a much clearer path to the park below?
So you're suggesting connections between Street B and Street D? Or Street
Correct.
River Street and Street A?
No, the B and D.
Yes. We haven't contemplated it as part of this. We don't see any walkway blocks, but I suspect, and given our previous discussions with city staff, that those are probably some of the details that we'll have to address before we bring the final draft plan back.
Thank you. On Conservation Drive, these places would be backlotted onto Conservation Drive? They don't face Conservation Drive, do they?
It depends the product that will be placed on those. So for example, if you go out to Wildflower and you see their 3-story townhouses that are there right now, the front of the unit actually faces the street there's the front door, but the individuals who live there actually have to go around to the back side of the street to get into their garage, and that's where their living space is. So dependent on the type of unit, I don't think that the region or the city would encourage private driveways out onto Conservation Drive at all. But I think that the feedback that we're getting is the desire to have some kind of more active streetscape than just rear yards.
Okay. Is there an affordability lens of this type of construction? Doing these back-to-back townhouses and on the smaller lot, the higher density. I don't. Is that part of the equation here?
I can't speak to the marketability of it. I'm not a market analyst, but it does definitely provide for a much wider range in housing purchase options for residents. So you get into the back-to-pack, they're smaller scale, less amenities, right up to the single. So we're broadening and hopefully broadening the range of residents we can appeal to.
Okay, and that was my questions. Any further questions from council? Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think the affordability piece is an interesting one to think of. I'm not sure if Mr. Cook's products are in the affordable buckets of the many developers that we tend to have. I certainly know there's some history there, but I've heard a lot, certainly from real estate associations, that increasingly a range of unit types beyond singles are necessary in the market that's growing to be able to get more people in. So I certainly hope that's something that we can that can be spoken to as we get further through the process. I think that's a helpful thing. A couple of other details. Councillor Freeman was looking at the draft plan and comparing it with this. I think one of the most obvious departures for me, and I think I know the answer to it, is the number of stormwater management facilities. The draft plan had 2. This has 1, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I could kind of give you the Coles Notes version, but I'm suspecting that Mr. Robertson is probably the better one to speak to the facilities and how they're located and how large they are.
You did suggest you'd call him up, so I thought I wouldn't let him sit back there.
Yes, pretty in on the hot seat.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. The stormwater management for the site and the district plan contemplated a facility at the southwest corner, down here, and then something up in this area. The interesting part about the land is that it drains up into this lower area here. So this made it to be a logical location for the stormwater management pond for about half the site. The other half of the site, more or less the east and south portion of the site, is currently in discussion with a joint facility, stormwater management facility, off the property. So the thinking there is that instead of the city having multiple facilities that they have to maintain over time, that there can be a combined facility down on the property to the southeast.
Certainly draining 1 swim pond rather than 2 or 3, knowing the math is helpful. So thank you for that. In terms of other drainage features, I remember asking this about the other subdivision plans that had come for your neighbors across the street, and there was a variety of bioswale features and other elements. And one of the questions I recall asking at the time was about ownership and maintenance of those in the long term, because I think in the other cases those were to be put on private property and the private owners were to maintain them, which I wasn't necessarily convinced would happen. But I'm wondering if you could speak to, particularly as we talk about the narrow ranges for drainage and lot coverage, if you can speak to how you're proposing to manage those kinds of features and issues on
yes, this particular site lends itself very well to some of the new, more accepted principles of stormwater management, the low-impact developments, infiltration, and as you may be aware, the ministry's direction that's coming down. We haven't quite seen it yet, but the guidance is clear that they are looking for infiltration of stormwater to recharge the groundwater. So this site is primarily a sand, silty area that facilitates that infiltration of stormwater. So we have a combination in the design And it's still in its early stages. Keep in mind that this is a draft plan, and there's a whole nother process that we'll be going through with city staff to refine the preferred alternative for it. Historically, we've we've implemented a number of different mechanisms, and for the most part, I think they've been successful. But it includes, like on this stormwater management facility that you see here, is something that we would consider to be an end-of-pipe facility. But even before it gets to that point, we are looking at taking the roof water and directly infiltrating it into underground systems on the lots. So at the back of the lots, there's the ability to have a holding area for that stormwater. So you'll see, for example, up here, there's a combined area back there where you can put this facility for the roof drainage and infiltrate that roof water into the ground. You may also be familiar with the west side Waterloo, the Vista Hills development, where a third pipe system was implemented and has been successful as well. So our toolbox of solutions is vast, and we typically work closely with staff later on in the process to come up with the appropriate solution for the particular site.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I think I noted on prior subdivisions where there are low impact development pieces that also match our stormwater credit program guidelines, or could. I think there could be some strong value in getting those in at the purchase point with the resident. So there's some awareness they're saving money by having these, but that they actually have to keep maintaining them for them to work right, and that increases the visibility rather than wondering why the heck the backyard is occasionally a bit damp after a large rainstorm for a day or two. And I think there are some ways that we can all work a bit better together on some of those. And the only other comment I had was similar to what Councillor Freeman was identifying in terms of getting this engineered right from a traffic calming perspective. I think if there's certainly places and crossings, but intersections are areas where we create these wide streets to create enough room for parked cars, but then we leave them that wide when we actually cross the streets, and you're not supposed to park near those anyways, and so there's ways to shorten crossing distances and allow some traffic calming there. So I do hope our engineering team and the applicant take a look at how we can have a safe traffic calmed neighborhood from the beginning, so we don't have to come back and retrofit things through a packed room of angry folks that don't agree on what we're trying to do, that we can get it done right from the first time. And it can be a selling feature, perhaps even, that this is safer. Every new neighborhood, we can get new ones if we don't do it right.
Further questions or comments from council? Seeing none. Thank you. Is there anyone else registered who are present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide reporting to council at a later date. Okay, next up, we actually have two formal public meetings, one of which I suspect will be short, but I'm going to, by a show of hands, is there anyone here who's actually interested in the first one, Columbia, of a citizen? Yeah, I know you're from that area. Because if not, so there's no citizen here tonight interested in the first one, Columbia. Are they all here for herb? Are you all here for herb? Okay, I'd like to swap those. Can we do herb first, Laura? You're doing both, right? Yeah? Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Councillor Dorr, what did you? Okay, so we're going to swap the two. We'll go with Herb Street first. Thank you. Okay, let me go here. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw application Z1712, Herb Street East Developments, Inc., 115 to 117 Herb Street East. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate register in the binder located on the desk at the rear of the council chambers. There is more than one tonight, so please sign the correct one. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of this meeting and the dates notice was given?
They're the same? Yeah. Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on February 8, 2018, and mailed or emailed on February 5, 2018, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on June 19, 2017, and to all persons who requested further notice.
And welcome, Laura.
Welcome. Shall I give a presentation without the PowerPoint? I'm going to have to. Oh. Okay. Well, I'm going to do my best without a PowerPoint. Is there no opportunity to get the PowerPoint? It might help with so many residents here.
Mm-hmm. Where do we have the presentation?
I never received it.
Ah.
Four?
It can't be too far away. It must be in the building. What's that? Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll come back and we'll get into Herb Street. Thank you.
Let's see. Do you have access to like the C drive and all that through here? So I should go downstairs? I'll get it. I'll get it. Well, I thought everyone's going to be so tired. I'll get it
Because this is about 2 hours. We all got the same one. Indicating there was a meeting. But there was no associated
It sounds to me like nothing has changed. It just makes so much sense. I mean, the school boards have these big fields, yeah, they've got and in most cases, as you saw here yesterday, it started even when I was at school, that they're adjoining parks, and they're adjoining storm water centers. So you get
Driving, because they have to meet all these things. You don't have to. You don't have to. Every opportunity that No, I don't. You got it? Excuse us. Sorry. Thank you. Got it all sorted? Sorry. It's embarrassing. Not as many as me.
I can't wait to get the buildings.
This one's the one you need, right? And I have hers.
Delete the other one.
Delete it? Oh, delete.
Delete the one that was wrong.
So we're doing 12 first, right?
We're doing Herb Street.
And then, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get started in 1 minute, please. I guess it's sort of formal public meeting for 117 Herb Street East with a presentation prepared by Laura Doer. We now have that presentation and we're ready to go. Please continue with your microphone on. I turned it off when I was over there.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, and the public here tonight. For this formal public meeting for zone change application Z 1712, I'll give an overview of the zone change.
Can't hear back here.
Oh, sorry. Shall I start again?
No, please.
Okay. So good evening. Tonight I'll just give a fairly brief presentation on zone change application Z1712, what the nature of the request was, and also I'll give an overview of what staff's recommendation is. So the subject site is located just west of the intersection of Herb Street and Moore Avenue. It has an area of 0.28 hectares, and the lands have been consolidated under a single ownership. So this aerial image just gives you a sense of context for the site. Water Park Place is to the west, St. John's Lutheran Church is to the south. To the north of the property, or the subject site, is an office building, and to the east is low-rise residential area along Moore Avenue. So the applicant is proposing a new apartment building on the site with 94 units. The building would be 12 stories in height at the front of the site along Herb Street, stepping down to 6 stories at the back of the site. There's a common terrace on the top of the 6th story and 3 levels of parking within the building. The site is within the floodplain, so there are certain floodproofing and safe access requirements they would need to meet. So this is the original architectural rendering that the applicant presented at the informal public meeting. And through feedback from council and staff, there were some subtle changes made to the rendering, which you can see here. And I'll let the applicant speak to some of those changes. So the lands are split designated in the official plan. The blue portion is mixed use, medium, high density residential, and the orange portion is mixed use, medium density residential. The lands are also split zoned. The blue is general residence 1, and the orange is multiple residence 4 stories. So on the blue portion, the official plan contemplates multiple residential buildings, up to 40 meters in height, and up to 600 bedrooms per hectare. But the zoning only permits singles, semis, and duplexes, up to 10.5 meters tall. So on the orange portion, the official plan contemplates multiple residential buildings up to 20 meters in height and up to 450 bedrooms per hectare. The zoning, however, permits singles to apartments up to 12 meters tall and 100 units per hectare. So what we have here are official plan designations and zones that don't align in terms of the residential building types, the height, and the density that is contemplated. So this zone change request involves, firstly, a change in the zone categories on these lands with the addition of several special provisions. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the blue portion from general residence 1 to multiple residence 12 stories, and the orange portion from multiple residence 4 stories to multiple residence 6 stories. Secondly, they're requesting a change in the maximum height from the 36 meters that's currently in the MR 12 zone they're requesting to the 40 meters that's contemplated in the official plan. Similarly, they're requesting to go from 18 meters in the MR 6 zone that's proposed to the 20 meters contemplated in the official plan. They're also requesting a shift in the measure of density from 200 units per hectare on the MR12 lands and 150 units per hectare on the MR6 lands to 500 bedrooms per hectare across the entire site. So the intent here is to implement the measure of density that we use currently in the official plan, which is bedrooms per hectare, but also create a zoning framework that allows a single building to extend across that split zone boundary. The maximum number of bedrooms that would be permitted here wouldn't exceed the combined total number of bedrooms on each portion of the site under the official plan. So if you calculated how many you're allowed on the blue portion and how many on the orange, it would be 140, and 140 is what they're proposing within this building. They're also requesting a reduction in the parking rate from 1.5 spaces per unit to 1.19 spaces per unit. They're requesting also a reduction in the surface or we call it surface in the zoning bylaw, but it's really open air parking requirement from 10% to 4% of the total required spaces, and a reduction in the ground floor habitable space from 25% to 22%. Lastly, they're requesting reductions to several building setbacks.
Laura, could you raise the podium so the microphone's a little bit closer to your...
Sorry, yep.
And it's right on the... Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So lastly, they're requesting reductions to several building setbacks, including, and I've shown them here on this image, the front yard setback reduced from 5 meters to 4 meters, the easterly side yard setback reduced from 3 meters to 2.4 meters, the westerly low-rise residential area setback, so for the 12-story portion of the building, they're requesting to reduce the setback from 20 meters to 9.8 meters, and for the 6-story portion of the building, they're requesting to reduce from 10 meters to 8.5 meters. At the rear of the building, it's partially due to the angle of the rear property line. They're requesting a reduction from 7.5 to 6.1 meters at the pinch point at the rear of the building. So in summary, staff has reviewed the request in detail, considered comments from council and the public, and is recommending council approve the zone change application with some minor adjustments to the density and the parking, as was originally requested by the applicant, and some additional zoning provisions to secure the design of the site and the building, and to require full municipal servicing to be in place prior to any development of the land. Staff is also recommending council endorse a number of directions for the future site plan application for this development. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Laura. Questions of staff? Councillor Durrell, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. If you could just go back 1 or 2 slides to the one where it shows the meters between the building and, I'm working with you here. Yeah, you got it. There it is. So when we talk about they're asking to go be rezoned up to 40 meters, which would mean the proper setback would be 20, 40 meters would mean 20.
That's correct.
And they're asking for 9.8. Do we see this very often? I don't remember seeing this very often.
just through you, Mayor Jaworski, through the new zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
So in the official plan, these lands are actually designated medium density residential. So again, we have this disconnect between what the official plan designation is and what the zoning is on the property.
Right.
So currently, because of the zoning of these lands, they do fall into the low-rise residential area category, but they're designated medium density residential. So through the comprehensive zoning bylaw review that is well underway in the city, we would be looking at rezoning these lands to a medium density residential zone, so they would come out of that low-rise residential area category.
Okay, so but 55 more and 57 more, there will still be GR, correct?
That's correct.
So R1 or whatever you call it now.
All of these properties that are adjacent to the property would remain in the low-rise residential area category for the long term.
So the only one that would be affected is that corner property,
which is where that reduction is being requested today. I'm just saying that was a big factor in our
staff recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. And then so from the 20 meters, which is what they're asking for. 20 meters in the the 6 that they're asking for at the back.
It's 10 to 8.5. So it's 7.5 meters or half the height of the building, whichever is greater. So in this case, the half the height of the building is the greater. So that's 10 meters would be the requirement, and they're
asking for 8.5. So it's 2.5 meters that they're.
So it's 1.5 meters.
1.5 meters. It's late. We've been here since 3. My math's not awesome. Okay, thank you. And 1.5 meters, what's a typical floor? Floor to ceiling would be like 2 meters or something, or a meter and a half?
I think it's
4 meters,
I think in this
6,
building
8?
it's 3.2. 3.2 would be the typical.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Thank you.
Further questions of staff? Councillor Freeman.
I just want to further understand your comments to the setbacks. So is this setback of 20 to 9.8 because you had to actually compare it against the GR1 versus the MR12? So what's the side yard setback for an MR12? What's the contemplation for that?
It would be rezoned, not MR12, because that zone will be no more under the comprehensive bylaw. But if it was to be an MR6 zone, because it's medium density residential, which is a likely zone that would align with that designation, it would be similar to the MR12 zone, which is what they're requesting, of 3 meters.
So, okay. Actually, I'm just going to say one thing, Laura. Every time we talk, if you can move towards the microphone instead of away from it, that would be great. Like, my ears are plugged.
Sorry.
I'm having a lot of trouble tonight. So, I just want to make sure I understand. Sorry? So, I just want to make sure I understand, so that if this were a multi-residential zoning, that setback would actually be 3 meters?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. All right. So these setbacks are actually closer to conforming to the future zoning.
In this scenario, in particular, yes.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Laura. From registered delegations, first up is Heather Price, GSP.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski and councillors. Thank you for showing me the trick of how to raise the table. That's quite useful for me. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to speak on behalf of the owner with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment application. I'm joined by the owner this evening. Mr. Lee Kieswetter is here, as well as the project architects from ABA Architects, who are here as well to answer any questions. Staff have provided a pretty good overview of the context and the planning instruments, as well as the requested changes. So I'm going to keep my presentation to some of the details of the development concept, as well as what we heard through the review process and how we've responded. So elaborating a little bit more on those changes that Ms. Dewar referred to. I would say that I would like to underscore that the purpose of the application is really to bring the zoning into conformity with the official plan. So the height requests and the density requests are largely, and the design concept itself, are informed by the official plan designation. So I think I'll just skim over this slide a little bit. You heard about the development concept at a high level in terms of the number of units and bedrooms proposed. The distribution of that density in terms of a 6-story building with a 6-story kind of podium at the front and a 12-story at the front as well. There is structured parking as part of the proposed development and a rooftop amenity space for the use by the building occupants. The entrance to the lobby of the building is oriented to the front, providing an entrance to the street and a walkway from the sidewalk. Balconies are proposed as part of the development concept. They generally faced east and west. And one of the elements that we've been working with staff on is pulling the balcony setbacks away from the property lines, and that's been changed since the last time we were here. So this is a planned view of the proposed development with Herb Street on the left side of the screens that you're looking at. The driveway for the proposed development is on the top of the page. It goes along the east side of the property, providing access to the garage at the back and a few surface parking stalls at the back as well. I think it's important to explain that the grading is a little bit of a challenge with this site. The grading does fall away from Herb Street into the interior and towards the back of the site. Another element that's complicating in the design is the fact that this is within the Grand River Conservation Authority floodplain area. So the regulated flood elevation is a factor, and to provide for safe access, we need to be above it. So that too has affected the design. I think it's worth noting, and while it doesn't show well on this screen, there is a retaining wall that's proposed at the top of this page along the driveway on the east limits of the property that would be visible from the rear yards of the properties that front onto Moore Avenue. This is something we discussed at the last meeting, and we've had subsequent discussions with staff to better explore what that would look like and how it can be more appropriately buffered to provide a sensitive interface to the neighbors. So this is kind of a good segue into our response to the comments. With respect to the GRCA floodplain requirements, as I mentioned, we have to provide certain things above the regulatory flood elevation. So through the review, the GRCA identified that the mechanical room, which was previously below grade in the parking structure, had to come up. So that's been relocated to the ground floor, and this is the ground floor plan that we're showing here. So you can see it's there's quite a bit going on there. Parking at the back, mechanical rooms at the front lobby, the other necessary functions like the garbage and move-in rooms, all happening up in this part of the building. And that has affected the amount of habitable space. So that's one of the zoning requests that's changed since we were last here. Next, we heard at the public meeting back in June to consider whether there's the opportunity to provide for commercial uses at grade, oriented towards Herb Street. And we did look at that, but as I mentioned, there's some limitations in this floor plan. Looking at the ability to provide commercial in this limited space, some things would get relocated. That might mean we'd have to reduce parking a little bit further, and adding more commercial space would require more parking, so it's a bit of a delicate balance. At the end of the day, the application is still pursuing a purely residential concept, but the MR zone does provide the potential for commercial in the future. Our client is not opposed to the flexibility on that option, and leaving that in the zoning should the things change in the future and a conversion could occur. With respect to parking, we heard some concerns about the potential for visitor parking overflow. Previously, we were requesting a reduction to visitor parking, a more substantial reduction to visitor parking, such that just the surface parking spots at the back would be allocated for visitors. In subsequent discussions with staff, we've decided that to increase the supply of visitor parking, meaning the allocation, and providing some of them within the building as well. As shown in the change to the elevations, there was a change such that the front corner of the building was able to be brought a little bit forward because the alignment of the lot is not quite perpendicular to the road. So to encroach a little bit into the front yard and seeking a little bit more of a reduction there allows for more articulation on the front elevation and a step back above the 6th level. So that too is part of the zoning recommendations before you tonight. Since the last meeting, we have been reflecting and meeting with staff to understand how best to address the interfaces on the east and west side of the proposed development, the west being the side facing Water Park Place towers, and the east being the side that meets the rear yards of the Moore Avenue properties. With respect to the west elevation, it's saying here reduced setback. In fact, we reduced our ask on the setbacks. The balconies previously encroached further into that yard, and since we last met, we've pulled them into the building a little bit more such that they're recessed and they don't project as far out. So that zoning ask has been reduced. The the setbacks that are proposed are adequate to provide sufficient landscaping, and we look forward to working with staff through site plan approval process to hash out the particulars of what species will be planted along that west edge. Similarly, there will be sufficient room on the east side of the property to provide for buffer landscaping as well. As I mentioned, there was some feedback about the retaining wall along this alignment here that I'm showing on your screens. So we've confirmed the exact heights that that retaining wall would need to be, and our client is amenable to having that enshrined in the zoning bylaw so that it is confirmed and it will not get any higher than anything that we have reviewed to date. Our client's also amenable to doing a decorative treatment there on that retaining wall, not a standard concrete wall, an upgrade and enhancement that will be detailed through the site plan approval process. With respect to that interface, there was also some concerns about the potential for headlights and glare, a light trespass onto those properties. So in addition to the detailed design of the retaining wall and the landscape buffering that can be planted there to soften the appearance of that, there will also be a board-on-board fence, a solid fence, that would obstruct the potential for light trespass from vehicle headlights. Lastly on this slide, at the previous meeting, there were some concerns raised with respect to drainage, concerns about ponding that might occur off-site from this as a consequence of this development, and that too will be detailed through the site plan approval stage and will be required to deal with all stormwater management on site and have no impacts to adjacent properties. Here's just a list of the technical studies that were submitted in support of the zone change application. These have all been reviewed by the appropriate agencies and departments, and no issues or concerns have been identified. With respect to the hydrogeological study, the last item here, the region of Waterloo requested that a more detailed analysis be done prior to site plan approval, specifically to look at construction dewatering. So our client is prepared to do that study, and I believe that's part of the recommendations in the staff report. So this brings me to what's next. Should there be an approval of the zone change as proposed, we still have quite a bit of work to do before shovels will hit the ground through the site plan approval process. Some of the items that will be looked at are refining those preliminary elevations that have been presented to more detailed elevations that will confirm the color, the materials, the style of windows, and all of those details. We will also prepare the detailed grading and drainage plans, the detailed landscape plan that will look at both of those interfaces that I described, as well as the landscaping around the perimeter of the property and the rooftop terrace. And there are recommendations in the staff report with respect to some of those details. We look forward to working with staff on that through the site plan approval process. Two other details that I have not yet mentioned are the need for a lighting plan. So a lighting plan will be prepared to evaluate any outdoor lighting that's necessary to illuminate the parking areas. That lighting plan will confirm that there's no light trespass onto adjacent properties. And finally, a wind study will be done to assess the wind conditions at the pedestrian level, as well as the wind conditions on the rooftop terrace, to make sure that they are comfortable environments from a wind perspective, and any mitigation measures that might be needed are incorporated in the final detailed design. So that concludes my presentation this evening. As I mentioned, I'm joined here with other members from the project team, and we would collectively be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Heather. Questions from Council? Councillor Girl.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you for your presentation. So in our council package, one of the things it had was the informal drawing and the formal drawing, and I'm really struggling to tell the difference between the two, other than it's darker. Because you did hear a lot of feedback from residents on a number of different things, and I appreciate that you've added a landscape proposal, which we can't approve tonight anyway. I mean, that's going to happen for the next 2-3 years. But I mean, the one thing you really heard loud and clear at that informal hearing was the height, and the people who live on Moore Street who will now have a 6-story plus building in their backyard, and none of those heights were touched. So I'm curious as to why.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the key change to the building elevations is the step back at the front of the building. But you're absolutely right that the overall heights of the building have not changed since our pre-submission our preliminary meeting at Council in June. And the main reason for that being that it goes to the feasibility of the overall project, and it goes to the applicant's intent to build to the vision of the city's official plan, to the scale that's intended per the official plan. So those are the fundamental reasons why you're not seeing changes on those elements, whereas the other elements that are that can be refined therein have been considered at length and will continue to evolve as we go through site plan approval.
Further questions? Further questions. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Heather, I think if thinking about the various step backs, I think we had some conversations with staff, or I should say questions between Councillor Durrell and Laura on various step backs and what is and isn't the low-rise area, what may be in the future the low-rise area and what isn't. The one that is still the low-rise area is that 6-story tower, is the 6-story building portion, I shouldn't say tower, the 6-story building portion where you've got a reduction from 10 to 8.5, I think that you're requesting. But that's not for the entire length of the site. So can you give me a sense of what the reduction is in other places, if any, and what portion of the site requires that reduction from the setback requirement for low-rise buildings?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Jaworski, I think I'm going to go back to an earlier slide that shows the plan. It's not highlighted quite as clearly as Ms. Stewart's presentation, but I can address that. That when we are seeking these site-specific reductions, it's always to the narrowest point. So in this case, where there is a request to reduce the yard adjacent the property that's currently zoned general residential but planned for a higher mixed medium density use, that 8.5 meters is the lowest setback. It's the narrowest setback. But as you can see along the north or the east property interface on this page, on the top of your page, there's a jog where the setbacks would be increased in this area. And reading that off the page, it's a setback of 12.6 meters in this region, whereas in this area it's 8.5. So it's part of the answer in that it doesn't, I don't know the exact breakdown, the measurement offhand, but you can see on this page where that relationship occurs. It's adjacent to these two parcels.
I think that's sort of helpful to understand as we contemplate what those step backs look like, where, and over those pieces. You've talked about how both you and Laura have talked about how at the site plan stage there would be a lot more work done on detailed design and drainage issues and how that servicing sort of is located where. And you've spoken to the city's general requirement that your client would meet of not increasing any drainage issues or any stormwater issues off-site as a result of this development. I think for most people they struggle to understand how that can be true. You see a place with lots of grass today and then you see a big building tomorrow. So can you speak a little bit first to how you would do that through design? I think that may be helpful for council and community to understand how that works. And the second question, I'll come back and ask you the second question after you answer that one.
So through you, Mayor Jaworski, it's a little outside of my area of expertise. I am a planner and not a civil engineer, and my colleagues who are civil engineers would be the ones looking at that. Generally speaking, they're looking to, the target is pre to post. So they look at the conditions as they are prior to development, and the expectation is that they be designed to that standard post-development. There is a functional servicing report that was done as part of the first submission that looks at that at a high level. And while I say it's at a high level, it is a lengthy report. And it looks at and confirms that that is indeed possible. And so that's why it's a functional report. And then they dig into the details of the methods for doing so at detailed design. The reason I'll expand a little bit in that I know why it's a limiting factor for the height of the retaining wall in this case. And that's so as to provide sufficient slope for drainage for the stormwater pipes and the other servicing connections that must go out to Herb Street. That has informed at a high level how high that retaining wall must be, what height the finished grade must be to cover the pipes so that they can get a sufficient fall out to the street. So that's the reason we do it. The civil engineers do it at a preliminary stage to essentially make sure that it works. There's no surprises at detailed design.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I hope that's helpful in terms of process and where these things get pinned down. The other thing which is in the staff report is the cross section of the buildings and the homes to service pond. I think in part to the beams of light from cars leaving the parking lot, but and speaking to the height of fences and retaining walls. But the note was also made around here about ponding in the backyards that can exist today with that site. That's happening. I do notice in that cross section that there is that low point at the property line, and so I would infer that making it no worse also doesn't necessarily make it any better. And I was wondering if there may be opportunities to enhance drainage along the side of that retaining wall if one is working on stormwater features through site plan design. Because it's one thing to make it no better, but I have a feeling that the ponding may then run up against overflow from another lane may run up against that retaining wall. So I'm happy for either staff or you to respond to how we might deal with that, or if that's an issue, because I don't purport to be one of your engineers either to speak to those issues.
I'll give it a try through you, Mayor Jaworski. This area really has a low elevation, and that's why all this rainwater seems to collect in this area. It's not because it's within the floodplain, it's just because it's low. And we do know that there's some ponding that happens on one of the adjacent properties, and really to make that, as Heather said, this development cannot make that situation or that condition worse. Whether it can make it better really would mean mitigation or measures on that property. So again, we're getting into a situation where it would require consents and easements and things like that with that adjacent property owner, and that's not something that really we can assume they would be interested in entertaining. But if they were, then it's definitely a possibility, I would think, depending on Heather's client's appetite for it as well.
Questions? Oh, Councillor Freeman, go ahead.
I'm just trying to better understand. Like, I find that these renderings just feel really off because they don't show that drop in the retaining wall and the change in elevation. So I'm struggling with visualizing what you're telling me is going to happen along that easterly wall. So I've got a retaining wall that's 1.5 to 2 meters high, and then on top of that I have a fence. And where are the trees?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think that perhaps turning to the staff report shows the relationship the most clearly, and it is a section that was prepared with the information from the grading plan, and it's on page 198 of the packages. It's not in my presentation, or I put it on the screen for you. But if everybody's there, what it shows is the section view at the worst case, at the point where the retaining wall is the highest, and it is not the same height the whole length along that wall. It follows the grade, the natural grade at the property lines where it's lower on one property next door. We're not changing that at their lot line. We're respecting that, coming up a little bit, and then building a retaining wall on this site in the location shown on the plan. On top of that retaining wall, there would be fencing, both as a safety measure, but also to obstruct the headlights from vehicles entering and moving along that driveway. Sorry, there was one other question, and that was plantings. The plantings would occur between that retaining wall and the lot lines. And we have actually on the next page of that, of the staff report, shown a preliminary landscape concept that identifies species of trees that can be planted in that 1.5 meter setback distance, and larger canopy trees that can be constructed in this portion where there's more space for landscape buffering.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, I'm looking at that tree plan on page 199, and the retaining wall literally supports the asphalt surface that I see here, and then the trees are on the other side, so they're lower. Is that right?
That's correct.
So they're in that zone where the property comes down like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Last call for questions. Seeing none, thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
We have at least one registered delegate, Dominic Bellissimo.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm here representing the... Oh, sorry, yeah, I should probably... I'm here representing the Moore Avenue neighbors, plus one of our neighbors on Herb Street. And I just want to say that we're in opposition to this proposed plan. We're not in opposition to any development, just to this particular plan. And the first thing I want to mention is that between the the staff report and the 93 page of the original application, it's just a daunting. There's just so many factors in this property. It's an unusual property. The property came about by buying 3 different properties, two different residentials, and then part of the property that belonged to the St. John Lutheran Church. Right? It's in a floodplain. Okay, and even just from the last speaker, we're trying to create, you're talking about raising the ground zero level so that we can drain and this and that and whatever. So we're trying to create a normal, so say, apartment building from, a floodplain or where water accumulates, right? The other thing is in terms of you talk about ponds. Well, it's a lake. Like at this time of year, for me to get to my shed, I need a canoe to get to the shed, right? And nobody has mentioned, and I've talked to the planning department, there's a culvert, in my backyard. The culvert is between my property towards the house, the neighbor to the north, 43 Moore Avenue, and the duplex, which goes underground, which goes into Herb Street. So whenever the city built those homes in 1940, 1950, that was the low point. So there's a lot of water accumulating there to start off with. So I think for most of the neighbors are going to be concerned about water. No matter what you do, it's always going to be a concern about water at some point. Okay, like right when there used to be just 2 homes there, we had flooding then. We used to have flooding then, and that's soft ground, right? After the 2 properties were built, they put in, like the whole backyard right now was a gravel, and that's now harder. And as soon as that was put in about 5 or 6 years ago from the owner, you could tell there was more flooding. And now you're going to put an apartment building, which is hard surface. That water is going to end up in, you can pump so much water out, but most of it will, when you have a heavy rain, it's going to end up in our backyards. Okay, so that's just about the water. In terms of the height and elevation, again, where's that ground zero? Like, you have to understand, most of our properties in terms of, like, our patios are here, this is the water park, and then the properties are here. And so if you look at what they're using for their first floor, I looked at the plans, their first floor is at the same level as my patio. So they've really kind of, so you're saying it's a 12-story building? It's not a 12-story building. It's a 12-story building plus, you know, the 2 underground parkings plus whatever to get to that height. The fence at the back of my property is 6 feet, and that's lower than my patio. So you're already adding stuff to there. And in terms of somebody, the previous speaker mentioned, or one of the councilors mentioned, lights from cars. Like, for instance, the water park right now, their back parking lot, it's only for visitors, so you don't have a lot of traffic there. But sometimes you'll have one of their guests or whatever leaving at 2 or 3 in the morning, and if I don't have my shutters in the bedroom down, there's light that goes right through it. It lights up my whole bedroom. So how, you know, and none of us are going to put in mature trees. Like, you know, I don't want the, I know neighbors on the other side when they did the Ontario Seed Company on DeWitt Street, they put in 2 feet trees in there, coniferous trees, for their privacy. That'll take 90 years for those trees to give, you know, my neighbors their privacy on the other side of Moore Avenue. Anyway, so so that's elevation. Again, I talked about privacy for lighting. For, you know, there's a driveway. So in other words, we have a road on the north side of, you know, our front of our houses, and we'll have this driveway laneway in the back of our homes, considering the parking is at the back. Like, there's no privacy. It's, you know, all that kind of ties in. You know, the privacy, the shade, the noise. If they have this patio on the 3rd floor, there's going to be lighting there. There's going to be, you know, whatever, people having a barbecue. Like, and then going back to, we talked about shade. Well, you know what, the report said there was 4 hours of shade, but most of that shade is going to be in the afternoon. Most of the neighbors on our street have small kids. You know, one of my neighbors, they have, you know, their trampoline on there. Their kids come home from school. Well, there's going to be shade in their backyard. You know, yes, there's sun in the morning, but they're not there in the morning, right? They're there after school. I mean, this whole thing is like, yeah, like it's just frustrating, right? Anyway, let's go to. I just want to go back to the density. The previous person had where you're showing the where is it here? The brown, the blue, and the, you know, the high density, the medium high density, and the medium. Well, I looked at one of the plans that was on page 28 of the original application. And the only blue part the only blue part in that whole part east of King Street. The only blue part is the section, the area A from the property we're talking about, plus the at the corner of Bridgeport and Weber. Okay, everything else is either high density or medium density. Why would they just pick that little part? Whoever planned the zoning. Why would they pick that little part to have medium high density? You know, that looks to me, I thought, you know, like, so you see brown, 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 you see a little blue, and then you see another blue area at Bridgeport and Weber. Like it just doesn't, the whole thing doesn't even make sense. Anyway, in terms of density, and I've talked to Melissa about this before, I've done lots of, you know, unfortunately we never had the opportunity to have a community meeting. Like, if you do a lot of research, Ryerson had a talk last year in North American cities. I know we're trying to increase our density. The most dense cities in the world have buildings of 3 or 4 stories. That's it. Those are the most dense cities. Last week in Maclean's magazine, they were talking about what's the problem with North American cities. The problem with North American cities is they try to have this high dense core area and very low dense suburban areas instead of sharing that density. Okay, so that's what else I want to talk about there. Yeah, so basically, we need to, lower the height, or even just kind of look at. It's an unusual property. It's a rectangle. Again, it's piecemealed by 3 different properties. We need to look at something that's more realistic, like those. one of the previous ones, stacked townhouses or like a 3-4, leave it at MR4 or 3, just like, you know, the nursing homes there. Like, you can still build a lot of, you know, units in there. It's just, I think it's just a too large a development, and there's no, you know, where's the city's responsibility towards environmental sustainability building? We need to look at that environment. You know, we're trying to, you know, we're just digging up everything to kind of to fit in so that we can build this apartment. Okay, and in terms of density, there was an article a couple of weeks ago in the Record about, you know, 1 or 2 story bedrooms, that there's a surplus of that. So what we need in Waterloo or in Kitchener is family homes. You know, as more families move in, as refugees move in, we need accommodation that will accommodate families, not 1 bedroom. We have enough of those. Okay, so. Yeah. I mean, and that's, you know, at this point, that's all I really have to say. I mean, I would like to, you know, propose that you guys defer a decision, and to have a commute. We've never had the only meeting we had an informal meeting in June, which is really kind of, you know, you have to present. We never had like a town hall meeting. I know Melissa had sent out because she CC'd a couple of people, on November the 12th of 2017 to somebody in the city of Waterloo to request for a neighborhood meeting, and we never heard anything from that. So in conclusion, I just think this, you know, we oppose this property because of all the things I've mentioned before: the height, the shade, the privacy, water, big concern. And in terms of the last speaker, to talk about our future work and having water included in there. What if it doesn't work? Like, you can't approve something and then realize, well, you know, we can't drain all the water we think we're gonna drain. You know, and when we talk about future work and we're going to work with the city, well, this, you know, nothing against the city workers, but they don't live there. We live there. Okay, across the street from us, this is whatever, like about 7 or 8 years ago, where the spa was built. Okay, the spa was built, and we were at a meeting like this. The city turned down the owner to build the spa there. Well, then the owner contacted the neighborhood. We had a meeting. He said, "What do you guys want?" We sat down. We decided what we want. And we came back to the city, and it was approved. And that's how you build. That's how you build cities, where it's a teamwork between developers and the city and neighborhoods. Not at these little, you know, most of my neighbors wouldn't want to present. So I think we need to open it up to like these community meetings, and so that's what I'm requesting. I'm requesting to turn this proposal down and to make sure that this neighborhood has a community meeting. Any questions?
Thank you, Dominic. I had the opportunity to take a walk around the neighborhood yesterday and see this property. I think Councillor Durrell told me the permeable driveway. Is that your place?
Yes, it is, yes. And so like I tell Melissa, I've done so much to be sustainable. You know, my house was in the Record. It was in the magazine of environmental. You know, I have no runoff water. It's all absorbed. And so I see this property behind me that is anything but environmental, And this development, you know, it's not proud to, you know, people come to my house and they know what's happening back there. Well, you know, with this proposal, I'd be embarrassed to say I live in the city of Waterloo.
Well, good for you for taking care of your own stormwater and that. Questions for Dominic? Seeing none, thank you very much, Dominic.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Whaley has a question of staff.
I have one from staff because of Dominic's presentation. So to you, Ms. Dewar.
You're okay, Dominic. Staff will take care of this. Thank you.
Ms. Dewar, he raised the dewatering issue. It's interesting to realize that there's not 1 but 2 floors of underground parking. So I imagine that the dewatering process is going to be major when I hear about all the flooding and the historic flooding in the neighborhood. I can assume that the dewatering exercise is going to be long and noisy. and what kind of controls we have around the potential noise complaints as a result of dewatering for like a year or however long it will take.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, all I can say is that we have a noise bylaw in place that would be enforced, and I can't speak to the technical aspects or how much noise is generated by dewatering. I can't even speak to the extent of dewatering that would be required on a site like this. So that's
so
really
wouldn't there be some kind of a, you talked about all the different studies that were involved in this, but there wasn't no groundwater or hydrological study that came with this to give us an indication of
There was.
how much?
That was something that the region took a close look at.
Okay.
And the region was satisfied with that. They are asking for that detailed dewatering plan as part of the site plan process, not
So
part of the zoning.
the dewatering just is pumped out obviously from the and into the sewers? Is that how it works?
That's correct.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley. Typically, there's many well points put in place along where the foundation would go, and that then they draw the water, and it is typically then it's monitored to make sure it's clean within standards, and then put into our storm system. It typically lasts as long as the foundation is being put in place, and then they stop the dewatering at that point. So it generally lasts for, could be a couple of months. I'm not sure exactly, it depends on the extent. But if the proponent is thinking of 2 levels of underground parking, then that's leading me to think that there is less of an issue than we have in the uptown, where they are limited to 1 level of underground parking because of the high water table. But in any event, they would also have to get a permit from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change for the drawing of the water as well.
Thank you. Further questions at this time? Seeing none. That was the end of my official registrants as delegations. Is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Please, step up to the podium and you'll have up to 5 minutes. Please state your name and municipality, please. And you'll need to turn on the microphone. And we'll have it on for you. There we go.
Okay, hello, council members and Mayor Jaworski. My name is Jen Bassick, and I'm a member of the Public Art Advisory Committee at the Region of Waterloo, and the City of Waterloo is a member of that. So whether or not this plan goes ahead or another plan through a neighborhood consultation, I'm just curious if there are any plans for public art, and if so, what they might be, and if not, how they might be included.
You do presentations, we listen.
Oh, then I would suggest that you look at a public art strategy for this development.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the delegate? Seeing none, thank you. And then to staff, how does public art figure into these types of applications? Is it normally with the bonusing, or how does that figure into it? For applications in general. Oh, we'll need your microphone, I think.
In this case, it would be a nice to have, but not a requirement of the development. So certainly hearing it tonight, it might be something that the developer would be interested in introducing to the site, and we would then secure it through the site plan agreement.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Whaley, go ahead.
Just as a suggestion, Laura, they did talk about enhancing the wall, and that might be the opportunity right there. I don't know, when you said enhancing the wall, I couldn't imagine what that might have been, but this might be the perfect opportunity to at least have that discussion. Thank you.
Next up, I see a delegate here. Please step up, state your name and municipality, please.
Mayor, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak quickly. My name is Dawn Charlton. I'm a resident in Water Park Place on the 12th floor. One of the unhappy people that might be facing a wall at some point in the future. I really just wanted to second the motion of Dominic to perhaps consider deferring the vote. It is true we really haven't had a lot of time as a group within the neighborhood to consult, to really familiarize ourselves with the plan, and also to perhaps come forward with an educated and well-informed response. And I guess I would say, having lived in Toronto, Vancouver, and Ottawa as well, I'm very familiar and supportive of high-density development, and that's certainly in residential areas. But this seems a little bit extreme for the location, and that's kind of how I think many of us feel. It seems that we're really trying to optimize and maximize with a very, very small footprint, and with all of the ecological considerations and others. It just feels like we're really trying to do perhaps too much for what the space would allow and what perhaps is reasonable for the neighborhood. So I would certainly ask if we could perhaps defer the vote and have a neighborhood meeting to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of Don at this time? Seeing none? Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Further people who wish to make a delegation tonight? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. Let's see what we have here. Councillor Doyle, please.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. One of the things that I often do, and I know it's not legislated, but between an informal and a formal hearing, I'll often organize, especially in uptown, just because we're not talking about little developments, we're usually talking about big developments. And so I'll arrange a public meeting, and that didn't happen on this one. And and I think that there is some room for conversation. So what I'm hoping is that, Heather, I'm not sure if that would be something that we could arrange, but what I'd like to propose, if council is amenable to it, is that Waterloo Council defer its decision on zoning bylaw amendment Z 1712 and direct staff to undertake further public engagement with the neighborhood and developer on this application, which would be a public meeting, which we would have to do very quickly. Further review the proposed development in the context of the surrounding low-rise residential homes, specifically exploring the concept of reducing the rear 6-story structure to 4 stories. And then secondly, I'd like that the formal public meeting continue on March 26th, 2018. So it's a short window for us, but I think that what I'm hopeful is that we'll be able to chat with the developer and the residents, and it'll be a less formal environment. I appreciate that Mr. Bellissimo got up to represent everyone, but I know there's a lot of voices, specifically on Moore Street in the single residential homes, that just aren't comfortable speaking in front of council. We're not scary, but I totally get it. And so I always find that informal space where we can talk back and forth can often be a really great, a great way for us. Not everyone will be happy, but everybody will be happy enough. So that's what I'm hoping, if anyone will second it.
I see Councillor Burke already has offered to second that motion, so we can have a discussion on it.
Thank you.
Anything to speak, please, Councillor Burke.
You know, we did a brief session earlier this afternoon, I guess now, on public engagement, which is important. We had, you were here, you enjoyed the full discussion about baseball diamonds, and we were out in that neighborhood 3 or 4 times to have discussions with people about what was happening. And Dominic, thank you very much for bringing that up, because I know that Councillor Durrell tries to pull, Durrell, whatever, I've Frenchified it for you, tries to pull these things together, and in this case it didn't happen, and that's okay. And I think getting everybody together, because I think there's a recognition that there is going to be something on that piece of land at some point. I think we all recognize what's happening. And so let's sit down, have a discussion, and see what we can come up with, because I think the developer wants the best too. Nobody wants to jump into a neighborhood and be hated by the neighbors. So I'm happy to second this, and let's go solve a problem.
Hey, I'm in charge here. Any further comments from councillors? Councillor Henry.
I appreciate Councillor Durrell's desire to hold a neighborhood meeting, since that was something she meant to do, I think, on this parcel, but did not get to prior to today. However, I am concerned about the specificity of the direction as suggesting an outcome to that process that may not be the outcome we get to that process. I certainly ask questions that would be related to that potential outcome of the applicant and staff today, and heard answers that would suggest to me that being so precise as to what outcome we might expect from this may be unrealistic. So I'm concerned about the specificity of the direction on height, but otherwise I'm happy to allow a conversation that would happen. Should council approve something or reject something tonight and it ended up at the board, the first thing that the board would ask is for people to have some form of conversation and mediation with respect to this process, and if that's what we can do now before a decision, that is probably valuable for everybody's time and money. I just have a concern about the specificity of the direction.
Further commentary? I think there's a good opportunity here for us over the next 4 weeks. We're going to continue the formal public meeting, it sounds like, and to, in the meantime, have, I think there's a good opportunity for the residents to learn about many of the things Laura talked about tonight, the official plan, the existing zoning. There's a lot to know, and it is an awkward piece of land, as Dominic said, but I must say in Waterloo, pretty much everything is an assembled awkward piece of land that has water issues, so that's not unusual, and we're going to see many more of them in the coming weeks. Seeing no further comments, I'll call the question on the deferral. All those in favor? Is that a for or opposed? I didn't miss it. It's opposed. One opposed. With that, thank you. This item is now concluded, but we move on to the next one. Please feel free to stay. Yeah. This is a formal public meeting to consider zone change application Z1705, 101 Columbia Development, Inc., 93, 95, 97, 99, and 101 Columbia Street West. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaws, should sign the appropriate register located in the binder at the rear of the desk of the chambers. There are 3, so please take care. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on February 8, 2018, and mailed or emailed on February 5, 2018 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on March 27, 2017, and to all persons who requested further notice.
The planner will now provide a presentation on this formal public meeting, and I will extend my apologies to those who were actually waiting for this and had to wait an extra 45 minutes, but I see you can appreciate we did have a lot of residents interested in the last one. Please continue, Laura.
Good evening again, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, and anyone else who's here tonight for this application. Just again, really brief presentation, overview of what was requested and what staff is recommending council approve. So the subject site is 5 lots. They will all need to be consolidated into one ownership prior to development. Surrounding context, located on the north edge of the Northdale neighborhood at the intersection of Albert Street and Columbia. So as you know, over the past decade, there's been a significant amount of construction activity in this area in the form of mostly residential and mixed-use buildings in the 4 to 12-story range. The applicant is proposing to build a new apartment building with 158 units, 188 bedrooms. So mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. There would be approximately 3,700 square feet of commercial space at grade facing the street. There'd be a number of communal amenity spaces both within the building, a landscape open space at the back of the building, some rooftop terraces, and parking is provided at the ground level and in underground level below the building. This is the original rendering for the project that was presented at the informal public meeting. Similar to the last file we just saw, there They massaged the building through the process, through feedback from staff, and there are some subtle changes to this, the design of this building, which I'll let the applicant speak to. The lands are designated medium density, mixed use medium density residential, and they're zoned holding, Northdale mixed use, 8 stories. The applicant's opting not to remove the holding provision at this time, so they would have to do that through a separate process in the future. So the zoning bylaw amendment request involves a reduction in the step back requirement, which is 3 meters. So they're requesting to go from 3 meters to 2 meters along that Columbia Street edge for not the entire facade, but for 70% of it. The remaining 30% would just be straight up. So no step back. And then it would be a 3 to 2 meters, it would be 3 meters to 2 meters step back along the Albert Street facade for 100% of that facade. They're looking at a reduction in the rear yard setback in this area, 7.5 to 6.1, and there's a sort of a pinch point here along this edge of the property. We do deem this a rear yard. It's kind of awkward, but so they would be reducing that setback from 7.5 to 3.5 meters. This is a side yard setback. They'd be requesting to go from 5.5 to 4.2. The second request is a reduction in the loading space requirement, just for a more compact loading space. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, they are requesting an increase in the maximum density. So they want to move from the 450 beds per hectare that's currently permitted to 600 bedrooms per hectare. So that would amount to an additional 47 bedrooms for this project. And they're asking to do that through density bonusing. So through ongoing discussions with staff, the applicant is offering a cash contribution to the city in the amount of $470,000, which is the equivalent of $10,000 per bedroom. And the monies would be directed towards the following community benefits. So $25,000 to an electric car charging station, $5,000 towards 2 bike repair stations, $100,000 towards the Northdale Community Hub Initiative, $100,000 towards the Waterloo Memorial Rec Complex expansion, and $240,000 towards sort of a bundle of Northdale neighborhood improvements. So it could be, that money could be used towards improvements in active transportation, so pedestrian connections and things, streetscaping upgrades, and also the bearing of hydro, overhead hydro infrastructure. So we're proposing that we would secure these community benefits in exchange for the density bonusing through a Section 37 agreement, and the contribution would be required to be paid prior to the issuance of the building permit. So we've reviewed the request in detail. We're requesting council approve the zoning bylaw amendment with some additional provisions to secure that double step back design of the building, and also to ensure there's ground floor commercial space in this building. We're also recommending council authorize the signing of the Section 37 agreement, which is in draft form at the back of the staff report. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Do we have questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, good job. I want to ask any registered delegates to come forward, and we have Brian Guter. Weston Consulting. Brian, welcome. And
thank you, Mayor.
What's the pronunciation of your last name?
It is Guter.
Guter.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be here this evening, and I wanted to just walk through very briefly a presentation. I'm here actually along with my clients, specifically the owners of the property, as well as the project architect. So to the extent there's any specific questions of an architectural nature, I will call upon them as required. I will go rather quickly through some of the context elements. I wanted to make a few highlights that my friend didn't specifically note in an effort to supplement her remarks. First and foremost, we've actually been in the process of developing the concept through submission that was over a year ago received by the city, deemed complete in February, almost within a couple of days of this evening. And we did have an informal public meeting and took from that meeting some key comments. I wanted to just highlight this for a moment, and with the benefit of my cursor on the screen, I'm not sure if I'm going to have the luxury of that. I wanted to highlight for a moment the composition of the building facade and the step backs was a key adjustment. And if you would recall, there was a portion of the building in this area that had a setback to the south property. I wanted to highlight those elements. Some of the internal configuration as well was adjusted. And with that in mind, this is the original concept rendering. And you'll see that what has been modified on a plan level, this area of the building has now been eliminated. The building itself has been shifted sort of to the northwest, and the result is a greater setback having been provided along the south interface, as well as a greater setback to the ground floor. And part of the building articulation that you'll see reflected is the image here is showing some of that condition of the change. And you'll notice that there's a fairly prominent change of the podium, prominence itself with the step back. This building actually, I think, reads quite well as the different components of the ground floor recessed, creating, in fact, quite an expansive streetscape along Columbia, which I think will go quite well towards the city's initiatives for what the plans are for that portion of Columbia. Similarly, along the Albert Street condition, the building composition is intended to be of a high quality mixture of sort of metal aluminum cladding, sort of a modern flavor of architecture. And the step backs that you can see, we've actually adjusted with some interesting architectural features at the corner, balcony composition as well. And one of the key elements, of course, is the step backs, both at the podium level at the third and then at the upper levels, both on Columbia Street and along the frontage on Albert. And again, the components of the building, as my friend pointed out, there's a few specific provisions that we're dealing with in the proposed zoning, but in essence, we're meeting the intent of what would be conceived of in terms of the overall aggregate height. Parking we have met. There was questions at the informal meeting about the intended uses from a commercial perspective. We don't have specific tenants. The hope is that should council find favor with the application, we can work towards a marketing campaign that would see some commercial space there. This is a landscape concept, and I should note that we have done a pre-consultation as part of the site plan process, and we're developing the plans. I just wanted to highlight we've got a strong landscape treatment, hardscape, softscape, widened sidewalk composed along the street frontages, as well as the building composition has amenities, a yoga studio, gym, those sorts of elements that will, I think, be quite attractive to ultimate residents here, as well as the outdoor open space component. I wanted to highlight an element here. This is a snapshot again of the ground floor as proposed with the second floor, and I'd like to note that the bylaw that's been prepared has fairly strictly controlled regulations about the facade, the articulation, and the percentages that Laura highlighted, both in terms of the setbacks at the ground. We're meeting the bylaw requirements in terms of a number of those, and then we're tailoring it specific to the composition of the facade. I would also note that, albeit the building itself occupies 5 properties, we have articulated the facade in a variety of ways to try to break up the mass a little bit with the treatment. This shows the expression of those changes in a section view. This is a view from what would be Albert, I guess looking to the east, northeast. You can see the step back at the upper levels, and then again the step back in this location. We've also accommodated, again, this is a view looking south on Albert of the other section that shows the articulation. I think quite a nice expression with some opportunities for terraces as well. And again, the proposed zoning as articulated in the staff report is provided for. We've actually spent a fair bit of time working through with staff, understanding some of the city's initiatives in the area, and we're again we are aware of, and you would have received correspondence from myself concerning the emerging review of your Section 37 provisions, and what we've conceived of is a suite of offerings as part of what we believe to be city initiatives that are represented and what my friend noted in the presentation. With that in mind, it is my view that the process has evolved such to deliver certainly an improved building design composition, and we're quite excited to move forward with the detailed design and see this ultimately come to fruition. So with that in mind, those are my remarks, Mayor and members, and to the extent that you have any questions, we're certainly supportive of the staff recommendation that is before you and would ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. First up is Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Ryan. During the unexpected break, I did ask you a question, but you didn't get a chance to give me an answer to it, so I thought I'd do it again here. And you've highlighted earlier that this has taken some time to work through the process, and
indeed,
and that's fine. But if there's one thing that's a little bit unusual for an application in Northdale, is that this request today isn't coming alongside a holding provision removal, which is what we've seen to date. And so there's some language in the Section 37 agreement, I think, to speak to how we'd like to see that move. But my question to you is, how long from now do your clients feel they are from doing a holding provision removal and getting through site plan and to a building permit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the question, I appreciate that. What we ended up doing is we elected, in discussions with staff, in the interest of time in getting the reporting to council, when the proposition was put to us to file the hold removal and have them be combined and proceed to a further meeting, we elected to take the earliest opportunity to have the matter currently in process tabled to council. And the discussion that we had in the hallway actually prior to our conversation, Councillor, was that of how quickly can we, following ultimately, if council so chooses an approval this evening, how quickly could we file the site plan and hold removal? We would do so at the same time, and the expectation we would have within probably 4 to 6 weeks, I think we would probably be ready for submission. And I can say that through the pre-consultation process, we did have the ability to fairly carefully discuss comments from the site plan team. And again, but for the decision at the time, the hold removal was not included. It was nothing more than a preference of timing, which has ultimately led us to today. And again, we're hopeful to move that forward should council again endorse the application.
So without prejudicing where we're going to be in a couple of minutes, the Section 37 agreement speaks to an escalator on the bonusing valuation starting 4 years from now. And my first reaction seeing 4 years from now seemed, oh gosh, is it 4 years until you'll get through the rest of this process? But what I'm hearing from you is you're not that far away. So if I were to suggest 2 years, would that be something that would be overly concerning to you and your clients?
From my perspective, through you, Mr. Mayors, we didn't specifically identify concern with 4 years or even discuss an alternative time frame. The intention would be to file site plan, proceed with marketing of the property, in due course through the process. I would be quite surprised if within 2 years we were unable to pull a building permit. But again, as drafted, we didn't have a concern with that. If there is a concern about that, I think we would probably be prepared to accept 2 years if it was adjusted, perhaps 3 in the middle. I don't know, again, the intention is to move on quickly with marketing, but I wouldn't want to be in a position where we find ourselves against the wall and have it, unwound, in good faith working through a process. So.
Further questions for Ryan? Seeing none. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
We have no more registered delegations. Is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this formal public meeting is concluded and is now open to council for a motion and debate. I see Councillor Henry has his hand up.
I am happy to move, reading off of our fancy Bill 73 sheet. Item A, council agrees with planning staff, having considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders and considered the professional opinions of planning staff, council approves zoning bylaw amendment Z 1705, 9395, 9799, 101 Columbia Street West in accordance with section 7 recommendations of IPPW 2018-03 for the reasons specified in section 6 conclusions of the report with one amendment, and that's that recommendation 2AH be amended to add the following, which is coming out of the Section 37 agreement, so just getting some parallelism in place. After the words to provide 10,000 per additional bedroom, add the words for up to a maximum of 47 additional bedrooms. In the event that a building permit has not been issued within 3 years of the date of this agreement, the 10,000 per additional bedroom shall increase 20% per annum commencing March 1st, 2021. I'm doing that on the fly. And all other words to remain accordingly. And I'd add that the Section 37 agreement be amended to align with that adjustment. So I'll get a seconder and then I'll make a brief comment.
Motivated. Councillor Burke is often motivated at these times.
So what I think is interesting in our new world of having moving towards a policy around Section 37 is we want to make sure that there is a reasonable share between applicants and the neighbors facilitated through the city whenever bonusing is reasonable and agreed to. But that those levels as they are set would change with time as time goes on because value is likely to change. So this agreement contains, I think, the first example we've seen of an escalator or penalty for delay. I think that's good. I think we'll get better language with future applications and as we actually get appraisals and things, which we don't have here. But I think that's a helpful thing that staff have put in there that the applicants accepted. And as we went back and forth, Ryan, I expected that I would say 2, you'd say 3, and so I said 3. So I already had that written down on my sheet, just waiting to hear that from you. But I think it's important to expect that this does move forward and that the benefits that we've assessed we should share. We will make sure that that's what happens. In a due piece of time framework. Otherwise, I'll say to the architect on this, and I appreciate the adjustments that have been made through this process. I think we have a very strong base and an interesting articulation, particularly on Albert Street, but all the way up. Meets, in my view, the intent we were trying to express through the Northdale plan of having those strong street faces, but then setting back where towers were to create some unique form. And your narrowest step back in what we've deemed to be your rear yard is against a parking lot for another development. So that wasn't particularly concerning to me, and it clearly wasn't to staff. And I appreciate other things that you've done to increase the setbacks in areas that are next to parcels. So I appreciate the collaborative process we've had so far. And in terms of where the benefits are going, I note that depending on where the electric charging station and bike repair stations go, between 72 and 80% of the community benefits in this agreement stay within the neighborhood. And that's exactly what council's direction was to be. And I think these with the flexibility attached to them will be very helpful as we continue to build out the Northdale plan, including the streetscape plan, the Northdale hub, and other aspects.
Wonderful. Further commentary from council before we vote? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you, and thank you, Laura, for shepherding these last 2 through. If we skip forward, we see there's the tax rate reductions for vacant and excess land, vacant unit tax rebates update. I'm sure there's plenty of questions on that. Oh, seeing none from council. What is Councillor Henry has?
My only comment, having seen that, and I appreciate the note we received earlier today, is that there's about the equivalent of a half a point on property taxes sitting out there in vacancy rebates. Mm-hmm. So though the region is leading this process and the region will get to decide the policy, I thought as area treasurers have these conversations, it would be helpful for our treasurer to know that at least one member of council and perhaps all members of council see the great opportunity we have to save residents money and not allow businesses to double dip, subject to learning more through consultation. So I think there's some opportunity for savings for residents here, and I encourage the region and our regional councillor to strongly consider doing so.
And we will tomorrow at the committee. Ms. Patel.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, just a couple of quick comments too. And we have discussed it at area treasurers, and they will be consulting the Waterloo Region Economic Development Committee too. So we've made sure that they are going to look at the economic development. They will consult with the business community. Their report articulates that, but I'm not quite clear whether they're going to necessarily meet specifically with the committee or they expect committee members to come to their open house. So this is where it's good if you can get the message out. I have tweeted this out, the link to the survey, and I just checked it right now. There's been 31 people that have looked at the survey and 4 responses so far. So it's not very much of a response, but I think it's an important decision that area council needs to be involved in for the region to be able to finally conclude on it.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody have anything, new business, other business, that kind of thing? Seeing none, no questions. Somebody want to enact some bylaws? Councillor Veith does, Councillor Freeman does. All those in favor of the bylaws? That's all of us. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Henry. Councillor Veith. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. A long night, a long day. Good job.